is something that is fairly new that I'm ready to put into play, and I am happy to be sharing it with you guys today. So the objectives of today is I would like to identify and demonstrate a clear understanding of statistical school violence, compare and contrast the role of a school counselor to that of an educator. We will also be critiquing alarming student behavior to be monitored and reported immediately. We will appraise the new wave of mental health 4.0, and I would like you guys to appraise it and also provide your points and your honest, critical feedback with using evidence to support your argument. We will also be constructing and brainstorming ideas to formulate and develop this product. And then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of room for questions and answers. So a little bit about myself. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kimberly Pratt. I am currently a PhD student here at Barry University. I'm pursuing my PhD degree in marital, couples, and family counseling. The reason why I pursued this helping profession or the profession of psychology or mental health is because I have always had a passion for not just listening to others, but also to make a difference in others' lives. When I was, I would say in my teen years is when I really decided that psychology was the passion I want, or the field that I would like to pursue, is because I had a psychology teacher that studied the field, but however, she said that she preferred to be a teacher instead of a psychologist. And then I started doing more research and I ended up becoming a school teacher. And now I'm in the field of psychology, but however, I was able to hone in my concentration when I was in my undergraduate experience at Florida Memorial University. And it was at my graduate or during my graduate experience at Nova Southeastern University that I decided to go full forward with clinical mental health and to create this platform, which is the new wave of mental health 4.0, to make a difference in the lives of K through 12 students. Now, the concept is because I got my undergraduate from Florida Memorial University in education. So I was a school teacher for a few years, and then I decided to merge into the field of mental health. And I'm incorporating education and psychology. And that is what I'm presenting to you guys today, is something that I created, which is my baby. And I'm happy to share it with you all. So I'm doing what I enjoy. I'm passionate about it. I know that I have a lot more that I still have to learn. As of now, I'm currently doing some strategizing and some work on my own self, and I'm advancing my clinical terminology. So I want to thank Dr. Mashuka for recently providing me a great resource to advance my clinical terminology skills. Also, I have some acknowledgements that I would like to speak on or expound upon. And I would like to give special thanks to all of these individuals who mentored me, they assisted me, they provided me with so much good feedback. They also helped me structure my approach, my presentation, on my outlook on life in general, also on the field of education, and also in the field of mental health. So the individuals that I would like to recognize and highlight are Jared Benjamin, Commissioner Oliver Gilbert, also the faculty and staff members at Florida Memorial University, and also the individuals at a school where I basically consider my foundation. I did not list the name of the school, but it is Excelsior Charter Academy. And it is there where I taught for a few years and I built a relationship. And that's why I did my actual research on the new wave of mental health, on what is needed in the school systems. And I'll go ahead and begin the presentation. So I always want to add a little quote in there. We know Lizzo is really popping right now. She's doing her thing. So I wanted to do a little twist of pop culture and also with intertwining in mental health. So a quote that stuck out to me by Lizzo is, "I finally realized that owning up to your vulnerabilities is a form of strength. And making the choice to go to therapy is a form of strength as well." So when I see this quote, I owned up to my vulnerabilities by also letting you guys in a little bit that I would like to advance my clinical terminology skills. And that is something that is significant because I do plan on creating or publishing books and articles and research, but I know that in order for me to get to that next level, that I do have to improve on myself. So that's something I'm vulnerable about. And also within my own personal life, I have received counseling or therapy before, so I do have a history and experience on speaking to a professional to strengthen my own insecurities or my own shortcomings. Now, the big concept of the new wave of mental health is how will the new wave of mental health 4.0 make a positive, a strong, a huge impact within the school system? And that's a question for myself, and I'm going to do my best today to answer that question on why was this even formulated and why are we evaluating it today? Here it goes. So my approach to the new wave of mental health was birthed on the mass shootings that take place within our school systems, and not just the mass shootings. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. However, the bullying, the violence that goes on in the school, the misrepresentation that goes on in the school that leads students to want to come back and retaliate. And it's so many different statistics that I've researched. However, it promotes me to even want to do more investigating, to do even more research, and to just go hard. And so the new wave of mental health, just so you guys will know what it is, it's a product. And you guys are going to see it at the end of this presentation. It is a workbook interactive that will be presented in the form of a PDF if needed virtually. I plan on doing presentations in person, all around the nation. I mean, I really want this thing to take off, but here is the research that I am basing my evidence or my data on. And these are from FBI reports, newly reports that I researched, also reports that dates back all the way to the 1980s. And if we look at the school system, if we look at the violence and the mass shootings within the school systems, it has been increasing. And because of this increase, I wanted to know, how can I create something that supports and decrease mass shootings, decrease suicide, decrease bullying, decrease the school officials not knowing how to get a handle on what is going on in the system? The FBI reports identify that there is 160 active shooter incidents that occurred in the United States between 2000 and 2013. And within that time period, 486 people have been killed. And if you guys, as I merge into this presentation, you will see that I will increase into the dates of now getting back to the 2000s and 2018 and 2019, and currently we're in 2021. So it has been an increase. And when we think about an active shooter incident, as an educator, I was trained to come into contact with an active shooter. And as a teacher, that some of the things that I was trained on, or we as educators was trained on, and even all of the school board officials, was to go into the corner. Some of you are not aware, I'm just bringing it to your attention so you know what we are supposed to be doing in these cases of a mass shooting. We were informed to lock the doors, to turn the lights off, or to put like something like a covering or a paper in front of the door, go into the corner, protect the students. We're basically putting our lives, the educators, which is something that I don't mind doing any day, any week, any second for my babies. We're expected as the educators to put ourselves on the line for the students, which is nothing wrong with that. But when you think about an active shooter incident, sometimes the rules goes out the door. I mean, you really don't know what to do. And if you're in a state of fight or flight, you never know what your response is going to be. So when I think about this active shooter incident and there being 160 way back in 2013 versus now where we're going in today, I had to come up with something to make a difference. As stated, there is a rising trend. The author and the researchers within this evidence that I stumbled across this magnificent evidence. It says the authors drew a straight line between one incident in 2013 after many in 1999, and 13 incidents leading us to 2013, and called that a rising trend. And until this day, until this second, we still have a rising trend in the mass shootings, not just in schools. I did my research now, not just in schools. However, school is the number 2 in the ranking. Number 1 is in commercial businesses or employment and basically in your job. So in employment or your place of employment, there's a rising trend that's number 1, maybe like in a factory or a warehouse or in these Fortune companies. That is the number 1 place. And then which is the commercial businesses. And then school is number 2. So that's still a high ranking for me. And then the highest ranking, it is interesting, however, that schools have been second, as I stated, in the highest of the risk for the location. The FBI data shows that the largest number of active shooter incidents from 2000 to 2016 are in the workplaces, in other commercial buildings, followed by education and educational facilities. Now, I want to get you guys feedback. Why do you think it's the highest in workplaces and educational facilities? Can someone give me a little bit of feedback? Like, why do you guys think these mass shootings and active shooter incidents are the highest in these specific locations? Anyone can answer.
Maybe employee dissatisfaction, or they were fired or mistreated of some type.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Now, can I ask you something, Carolina? Based on, what is your employment, by the way? What is your position? So I would know. Like, what?
I'm a therapist.
Okay, so as a therapist, great. As a therapist, do you feel like you would be prepared to, or are you currently prepared now? Let's just say, for instance, a mass shooter came into your office where you were working. Are you prepared, or do you believe you are prepared enough to know what to do if an active shooter was to come, or do you believe that you would embrace the fight or flight and just do whatever comes to mind first?
I would honestly have no idea what to do. I am virtual right now, so that takes away from that, one of the benefits, but I have no clue.
And thank you for that honest feedback. And that's how a lot of our students feel. A lot of our professional educators feel, a lot of the school officials and the staff administrations that are in the office, because they're feeling like, you know what, I don't have an idea of what to do. So for all of us who may not have an idea of what to do, and even those of us who get specific, direct training, we really don't know what we would do if we were to come into one of these situations. So the new wave of mental health is trying to prevent. The goal of today, or the goal of my product, is for us to prevent that from even happening. So we don't even have to come in and figure out what we're going to do. We don't have to do anything but prepare our students so that they feel they don't have to come into the school systems or into their place of learning and retaliate for something that could be avoided. Terrible mass shootings like the one at Parkland Senior High School is shocking, and it has become more increasing and more common. And actually, the reason why I wanted to speak on the Parkland, Florida incident, and I pay homage and I pay my respects to the lives that were lost there, is because it was really, really tragic. It was something that made the nationwide news, nationwide televisions, like, what would you do, or how does a parent respond to sending their child to school and then not seeing their child come home? So I'm sending my child to school to learn, and I'm expecting to see my baby, or I'm expecting to see my son, or I'm expecting to see my daughter return, and then they never make it back. Can someone tell me of how would you react, or what do you think you would feel being one of these parents at Columbine High or at Parkland Senior High School? How would you react to losing a child or losing a loved one, even if it's your spouse, to a mass shooting? Like, what would be your first reaction?
Angry.
Angry? Marja said angry. That would just
disbelief for me, because you send your child to school and you're just expecting to either pick them up or see them in the afternoon, and to hear something like that is just that knock you off your feet.
Thank you, Shandrika. And also, go ahead.
Sorry. I agree with Shandrika, but I think I would be more in denial because, I can't believe it. The school's supposed to be a safe place. So, yeah.
Thank you, Narissa. And I have a question for you. So do you feel like the school is in fault for a mass shooting?
Can you repeat that for me?
Narissa, I said, do you feel, because this is something that I also want to do a little bit more research on. So you said that I want to know, will you hold the school accountable? Because sometimes parents come back and they try to sue the school board for something that really is unpredictable. So do you feel like you will hold the school accountable for the loss of your child?
I honestly believe I would. For like here in the Bahamas, I don't think that we take mental health as seriously as we should. So because of not educating persons and not having the resources in the school to protect the kids, I think I would probably hold them accountable.
Thank you for your honesty. Would anyone else
I
like
think
to give their
I
feedback?
agree. I agree with that comment. Because you do send your children to school and hope that they're safe, right? I think one of the positives of the year that they were virtual is that we didn't have to worry about that, right? I didn't have to worry about that when I send my little one to school. So I do think they have to be accountable. At my daughter's, she's in elementary now, but in middle school, the principal has a droid, and he flies it around, especially like during lunchtime and at any time. He'll just check up on them when they're outdoors. I mean, that's just an extra layer of protection, but they definitely are accountable. And I think the Parkland shooting could have been prevented if somebody was aware, or somebody would have listened, or somebody would have intervened.
Okay, and who do you expect, or who do you think this somebody should be?
I think anybody, from the parents to the teachers to the classmates, the counselors in the school, anybody.
Okay. So how about, can I give you a scenario? And I thank you so much for your interaction.
Sure.
So let's say, for instance, a mass shooter or an active shooter was to come to your place of employment. Do you feel like, and then they end up harming or being a fatal event at your employment, and you guys lose about a few staff members, I'm not even going to number it. Do you feel that you can be held accountable for that mass shooter entering the building?
If he was part of my direct department, or if he was somebody that was there. I mean, this kid was a previous student, wasn't he? I believe. So if it's somebody random, then of course, how can you hold that person accountable? But I feel if it's somebody part of that system, then yeah, the system itself is accountable, because there were probably signs there that weren't picked up.
And that's something that I definitely would like to discuss, the signs of what we're supposed to look for. So I'll go ahead to the next slide. Here, you guys, is a draft of the school shootings and how they are increasing. We have elementary, which is in the orange or the peach color or orange colors, the shading. Middle school is in the purple, and then the high school is in the green or the aqua color. As you can see, who can tell me which color has the highest amount of school shootings that are increasing?
High school.
And why do you guys think it's high school? Can someone tell me? Like, why do you guys think that the increase is taking place in high school? And then I'll give my feedback. Anyone?
I really don't know. I think maybe as the kids get older, there's less parent involvement.
Okay.
Maybe it's, I don't know. I have no clue.
Thank you, Carolina.
I think it's also like more easily accessible the older you are, and you have more of like the mentality to know like what you're doing, whereas when you're younger, your mind is not necessarily there yet, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Milagros. And that is some great feedback. As for me, I believe culture plays an important part in the school shootings. I also believe that in some instances, race. I believe gender. And the reason why I think that high school, just on my own specific research, the reason why I think that high school is having a higher increase in it is because it is within that phase of life when our teenagers begin to realize what is going on. Their feelings become more intense. They end up facing more challenges versus those of an elementary student or a middle school student. Although they deal with their own incidents, it takes place in high school because they're challenged more. Their lives are challenged. They have more on the line. And I feel like their emotions get the best of them. And something that we don't discuss enough is counseling or therapy, that it's okay to speak to someone. It is okay to not be okay. And I think that that is something that should be incorporated into the school system and actually should become a part of the curriculum, the daily curriculum. And if not daily, at least weekly, it should be revised, not just a school counselor to modify the behavior of a out of control student, but it should be taught as something that we have to learn and something that we're assessed on. That way we can target the behavior. We can target those signs that someone spoke on and said that they should have noticed the signals, or they should have noticed the warning signs. How will you notice the warning signs if you're not assessed? How will you notice the warning signs if you do not know what to look for? How will you notice the warning signs if you really don't have a professional that is working on this specifically? Just how we have a reading teacher, we have a math teacher, we have a Spanish teacher, we have a music teacher, we have a physical education teacher. We need a teacher that is specifically planted in the schools for mental health, not just a school counselor, because as an educator, from my own firsthand evidence and knowledge, normally when a student goes to the counselor, it's because they're doing something they should not be doing. They're acting out of order. They've been bullying someone. They're not doing their work. They're not sitting still. You know, they have these other issues maybe going on, maybe an IEP plan or a 504 plan or something of that nature. We need someone to target the students who looks normal. We need someone to target the students who looks and act like everything is okay. Those normally are the ones that have these issues of isolation, these issues of anxiety, these issues of depression that wants to harm themselves. You notice the ones that is always ripping and running around the school, yeah, they need counseling. However, they're reaching out for help. They letting you know something is wrong with me. But what about the ones who are not saying anything? The students that are mute. Those are the ones that the new wave of mental health 4.0, we're trying to reach those students. Now, the evidence reported specifically surrounding school violence, and I wanted to highlight evidence reported specifically. Images of running teenagers with their hands up at Columbine High School has become hauntingly familiar. And the reason why I say hauntingly familiar, because I remember the term of copycat criminals or something of that nature back in the days. A student sees something and then they want to imitate it and see if they can do it better. They want to see if they can kill more people. They want to see if they can be more vicious with their intent in it. I mean, it's adding up. The numbers are really getting hysterical, and we're losing our little ones. We're losing our children, and no one deserves to get a call from the school or have an officer or a law official come to their door saying, "We lost your child." John Cohen, a Department of Homeland Security official, said that Columbine absolutely influenced subsequent shootings, which means that copycat killers, they want to get out there. Some students feel like they're not heard, they're not seen. These students who I'm telling you guys about, when you ask them a question, or you're, as an educator, sometimes we ask open-ended and closed-ended questions just to see what response we would get, just to fill the room out, also just to do an open assessment. And some students, they never say anything. But those are the students normally that have the most to hold, the most to share. As it relates specifically to school shootings, Columbine seems to be the one incident that school shooters look at. Key issues. Data from assault studies revealed that arguments resulting in violence are a considerable problem for American youth, as both victims and aggressors. And since we're speaking about the key issues outside of mass shooting, outside of active shooting, outside of the bullying that take place and the violence that take place in the school, what are some other things that we need to improve upon in the school system as it relates to mental health.
Kimberly,
Anyone?
just a 2-minute warning, okay?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I wish I had a 5-minute warning. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm almost done. So you guys, this is a chronological list of the school shootings in the United States. And it shows that, as you can see, that it's the deaths and the injuries are increasing. Thank you for that reminder. Here we just have some a combination, because I did want to compare and contrast between middle school and high school violence. And of course, it is more significant in high school, as the data or the graph that I previously shown stated. And then this is my SWOT analysis. So the strengths of the new wave of mental health is that data can be collected and evaluated across multiple grade levels, K through 12. So I'm going to incorporate different flexibilities within the assessment that target different grade levels. The opportunities is that the curriculum can help build and revise the product. Whatever the school or the state board standards are, I can revise it, I can shape it, I can tweak it to make it work for that department. The weaknesses is that student levels in their interpretations may impact the findings. Every student interprets things differently, so their responses may not highlight that there is an issue, or may diminish that there is an issue, and we may overlook it, and that may be an issue. And then the threats is the biases among officials reviewing the results. So everyone review results differently. So one may say, oh, that's nothing to be alarmed about. However, I may review it and I may say that is something to be alarmed about. So the biases is a threat. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to share with you guys the product for the last minute. I'm just going to go over it so you can see the book that I would like, my workbook that I would like to share within our school system around the world, globally. And then, of course, here's my references. And here is the actual workbook. Can you guys see it? So I'm just going to skim through, and here is the Mental Health 4.0 Volume 1 Interactive. Then this is my dedication. This is myself, and this is a little bit more of in-depth information that the new wave is all about: evaluating, intervention, psychological seminars, presentation. Is much more that I would like to offer. My table of contents, and this is what the students will actually have, you guys. So it would give a little bit of their background information, mental health statistics. This is what they'll be working on. This is something that asks them about bullying. And I'm just going to go through so you can see, since time is really running short. SMART goals. I have a behavior intervention plan just in case the educator needs it. And so this is what it looks like. So here, you guys, is the product. And then the teacher at the end of the booklet can provide their feedback on what they believe the student needs to improve upon. Here is a mental health mini crossword puzzle, and they have the students to define it. Now, the goal of this is to assess the student without them knowing they're being assessed. So they're doing these activities, they think that they're doing something fun. However, this is not something that is in the school system right now, which we need. So this is clinical information that can be used by the teacher, that can be used by the clinician, that can be used by the principal, that can be used by parents to gauge and see if an issue is really going on, or if something is within the child's mind that we need to do a little bit more in-depth assessment on, and then we can go from there. So here is how I would like to incorporate it into our school systems. And thank you guys so much for having me. And I would like to have, anyone have any questions or feedback for me? And I'll stop sharing now.
Kimberly, that was awesome. Very
Thank
good.
you so much.
Yeah, Kimberly, that was great. I hope you can really get it up in the schools.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for presenting that, Kimberly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you as well.
I'm gonna let you guys connect in the chat with Kimberly so we can keep moving along. Okay. And for the next speakers, keep your chat open because I'll give you some warnings in the chat. So our next presentation is utilizing telehealth technology to enhance the consumer experience. And we have 3 wonderful speakers. We got Milagros Rubi, who's a student in the Master's in Arts and Administration at Barry University, is image supervisor at West Kendall Baptist Hospital. And, during her time at Baptist Health, she's held multiple positions to enhance the consumer experience And among these was her role as a care coach, in which both physical and mental well-being of individuals recently diagnosed with breast cancer was of top priority. So thank you for being here, Milagros. And then our next speaker with her is Leonor Carreno, who's a corporate trainer for patient experience at Baptist Health, South Florida. You guys are a team, it seems. She's been with the organization a little over 3 years. Prior to her role as a trainer, she was patient experience advisor supporting the outpatient division. Her focus on patient experience is to find ways to elevate every touch point the consumers have and to truly connect with their mental and emotional needs, not just the physical needs that brought them to the healthcare center. And along with Milagros and Leonor, we have Jalane, who's got so many titles, I don't even know what they are. Is a professor of administration in the School of Education. Dr. Maloun received her PhD in industrial organizational psychology from the University of Akron's top 4 nationally ranked program. She's an award-winning author, public speaker, community service provider, and professor. And this year, she was also chosen to receive the Community Service Engaged Educators Award through the Center for Community Service Initiatives. Thank you so much for being here, all 3 of you, and I'm going to let you present.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Just a second.
Pulling it up right now. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. So Millie and I, as you can see, work for Baptist Health, and we really, we're wrapping up our master's program, which we're really excited about. And we wanted to, during our research, we really wanted to maybe find a tool that we feel is beneficial to our consumers that maybe is not necessarily meeting or exceeding those expectations. So that's a little bit of what we will be sharing today in regards to utilizing telehealth technology to really enhance the consumer experience. Just a little bit of where we are with healthcare. If we looked at a few years, well, probably more than a few years ago, the focus is always to go see the provider to make me feel better. And they were the sole experts. You did whatever they said. And we have consumers now coming into urgent cares, to hospitals, to diagnostic centers. And now they have more knowledge. They are Google experts. They write their own plan of care. And we know that the physical need is not enough to truly make our consumers feel cared for. That it isn't just making them feel better physically, but how do we take care of their emotional needs that come with certain diagnostic results or just things that happen to us as we get older, right? It isn't just how do I make you feel better, but really how do we take care of you? How do we take care of your families, right? So we kind of, that's kind of where we are now with healthcare, that we really need to look a little further to really make sure that our consumers are happy. Oh, hold on. There we go.
Awesome. Yes. And so like pretty much saying to what Leo was explaining is that the purpose of our study is to focus on technological advancements in healthcare and how it relates to the quality of care and consumer satisfaction. By utilizing technology, specifically portal access, physicians and consumer engagement will increase and therefore improve outcomes for both treatment and prevention. So pretty much like, you may be asking, why did we choose the portal? There's so much, right, that's going on in healthcare. Why the portal access specifically to enhance the experience? Well, I'm not sure if you guys know, but Baptist Health is a very innovative hospital. My hospital specifically, we have, Leo will discuss that later on, but we have multiple sites, but ours specifically was the first to pilot the GE revolution in the world. So we had the first CT scanner of its kind with the latest technologies, and it was the fastest machine at the moment. Currently this year alone, again, we're doing it again. We have the first GE Ascend. So definitely the technology is there, right? It has artificial intelligence, and therefore, you know, the technologist has to spend less time with the machine, like, you know, it's more precise than what we had before and has more time to engage with the consumer. So,
Millie,
yes.
maybe you want to define what GE is, or any sort of proprietary acronyms.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So GE is
No
General
worries.
Electric, and it is a manufacturer of a scanner which we utilize to diagnose or to find diagnostic imaging for care. So they pretty much have a lot of different types of machines, but because Baptist Health is very involved in having like the latest and newest technology, which is used to enhance the consumer experience, they actually came to us to see if we were interested in piloting the first machines of its kind, which has the artificial intelligence, so it's more precise, it's more accurate. So it's definitely a big deal. While all that is important, you know, like that's great, that's not what's going to set us apart, right? That's not why the consumers and their families are going to come to Baptist Health for their care. So this led us to like ask ourselves, how do we merge this great technology that's at our fingertips to enhance the customer experience and to help us with preventative care, and not just preventative care, but overall care, both physical and mental well-being of the consumer.
So a quick overview of Baptist Health. So we serve the communities from Miami-Dade to Monroe down in the Keys, Broward, and Palm Beach County. And the picture you see here on the left is actually what we call our mothership, Baptist Maine, which is on Kendall Drive. And from Baptist Hospital, we have become Baptist Health. So the last 60 years have really shown us a lot of growth and a lot of learnings. We consist of 11 hospitals, over 100 physician practices and outpatient centers, 23,000 employees, 4,000 physicians, and we have 1.5 million visits a year. Okay, we truly serve across all platforms our communities. And as we continue to grow and know that technology is the way we're moving, right? You really cannot get away from it. How do we truly help 1.5 million people that come see us, right? If we're throwing out technology because we think it's the best and we think that this will be helpful, well, how do we know that we're really creating the impact that the tool is for, specifically the patient portal? So I think that sometimes we have a lot of resources at our hands and we have the best intentions, and the impact is not what we expect. So this is just a preview of what it looks like, right? I think it's beautiful. The main screen to the left, right? It says you can message. It looks like you can schedule appointments. You can upload medications that you take, right? A lot of times that's a question and we forget half of the things that we take, or a lot of the consumers where I'm like, oh, well, I think I have this one medication I take once a month or something, right? So this is meant to be a helpful tool for them to be able to access all of their healthcare needs, to be able to see if their images from a diagnostic center are up and running. Can they get that to their doctor? They have access to their records. So ideally, this really serves as supposed to serve as your one go-to with all of your information. And obviously different generations have either ease or difficulty with technology, but really the point is to remove that burden from the consumers, right? We don't want you to stress about whether you remember the medication or not. We want you to find everything that you need in this one place, because we want your experience to be seamless. So I will let Millie explain a little more about why that is not what is happening.
Thank you. So yeah, so like what Leo was saying, this does look great, and it does look like if you can do a lot with it. But the truth of the matter is that I have this portal that I personally use, and when I have tried to utilize it to get the information that I need, right, to make my care more seamless with my providers, it lacks, like I'm unable to send a message. You know, when you click the send a message icon, the only thing that it does is that it prompts you to pretty much a user guide on how to use the portal that you already have. So no one is really responding to your messages or interacting with your messages. All the appointments that you see are all past appointments. So nothing is really, it's not very interactive, and it's not being, you know, you're not able to do or utilize it to its full potential. So that's pretty much what it is currently. So what are the opportunities? Currently, definitely one of the biggest opportunities that this portal has is the communication component, right? We want to be able to have real-time communication with our providers. Imagine that, you know, you just recently got diagnosed with something and you have a question or concern, or you know, you're worried or anxious. Like, you want to have that reassurance that you can reach somebody and be able to communicate with them either through messaging, so you know, to have like an adequate time to get a response, whether it be 24 to 48 hours later, or have the accessibility to have that telehealth accessibility through the portal. I know that from my personal experience with a different portal with my physician, I do have that opportunity, right? I am able to communicate directly with my physician, and I do get a response either from my provider or someone in the office. The Baptist portal currently lacks that. So I think that that'll definitely be a great opportunity for the portal. It also lacks interaction, you know, being able to upload a prescription so that that way you can either have your medications filled, or you can have somebody call you or reach you to schedule an appointment. Being able to update your medical history, you know, kind of make it more where you are specifically involved in your care. It's definitely an area of opportunity. It definitely enhances the engagement and the consumer satisfaction, and it's definitely an area that, you know, Baptist Health will see a significant increase in their satisfaction if they were to just engage a little bit more in that. And then there's also the capabilities. So being able, you know, this portal that we currently have is not being utilized to its maximum capabilities, whether it be because of a generational gap or lack of education. There's so much more that can be done with this that is not currently being done. So for example, if we have the ability to schedule our own appointment, that will be a game changer, because you will see later on that it makes a difference when you take control of your care than when someone is pretty much guiding you or doing it for you. So being able, like I said, to be able to send those messages and have that real-time capability will definitely change the experience and the utilization of the portal.
And even to jump in, because we've all gone through this pandemic and in COVID and what it's done to everyone's emotional state. Think of you walking in to an urgent care, right, or to any Baptist facility. You have a COVID test done and you are waiting for the results. And sometimes the whole no news is good news works at some practices, right? That it could be an OB, it could be a cardiologist, right? If we don't call you, everything is great. And in COVID specifically, that was not an option. The no news was stressful, caused anxiety. You did not know if you were affecting your family, right? What would happen next with your kids? So, and our direction was your results will be found on the portal. People had wrong emails. They never received a message. The login, right? All these things didn't work. So again, already at high level stress, we are now making our patients call facilities, right? Go walk back into where they took a test, which is not what we wanted, right? We could potentially just get more sick. and that's not good for the well-being of you, whether you felt sick or not. That was not the way that we expected, right, for this portal to work. We said, great, people will log in and see the results. That was not happening. That was not there, and it took a long time. So what we did, I feel, was more hurt the consumers and really create more anger and more anxiety than really be helpful. So some of the findings from our research, and Millie touched on this, when consumers are part of the decision making of their care, and they're more involved, they're more apt to actually listen to their providers and actually follow through with any type of care plan that has been given. Like she said, if you're the one owning making your appointment, you know that you will attend, right? We're giving you that power. Why? It fits with your schedule. You're able to go to work and then go later, drop off the kids, whatever it is that you need. You felt like this is a good time for me, and not us providing that for you. Right. So we want as much as possible for our consumers to be engaged in their health. And then it creates consistency, right? The moment it works one time, we're very easily apt to say, okay, I will then go again into my portal and make an appointment, or I will upload my prescriptions because my doctor will see them. Right. When it comes to quality, the same thing. When you have that open dialogue with your care team, and you see that you're part of the team as well for what is going to happen to you, right? Whether good or bad, whatever that may be, you will listen and you will say, okay, I will go to my preventative care visits. I will follow my take home instructions that the doctor gave me, right? When we don't have that involvement and that engagement, the quality is not always there, because at the end of the day, if it was such a burden and so difficult for the consumer to make an appointment, to go see their doctor, to upload a prescription, what are the chances that you really want to go to your follow-up visit? Right? So now we're delaying care. So that's what we found, is that the more engaged and better the portal is, it really is beneficial to the consumer as well as to the clinical team. And at the end, when it comes to that consumer satisfaction, when there's that conversation and that connection of a staff working together to care for me, you feel valued, right? You're a person. You're not just another number for the day walking into the building. No, I care about you and your needs today. And in the long run, there's trust and there's loyalty. So even if you think of from business perspective, right, you want people to come back to you, not necessarily you want them sick, but if that's the option, well, let me go to Baptist Health, right? And if we don't improve the patient portal and we continue to make it difficult, right, people don't feel valued. I don't want to go back. There are other options. So these are just a few, and we will not read through all of them, but this was just some of the literature that we found that really backed our findings. So I'll read: when clients are involved in making decisions pertaining to their health, the outcomes as well as the sustainability management are extensively greater than when they lack engagement.
And then studies have found that clients who book their own appointments through the portal have a lower no-show rate. So pretty much going back, people want to take ownership of their health. That is the way that we're going. As Leo has mentioned, we are now a lot, we're more educated. Like, we do our research. We just don't go by what someone is saying. I know that from my own experience, and I'm sure maybe many of you as well, if somebody tells you one thing, you're just not going to go by the first recommendation. You may get a second opinion. You'll do your investigation before you make you want to make an educated decision. So all of these play a role, and having that ability to schedule your appointment and be an informed client makes a difference in the engagement and satisfaction of your care plan.
So some of the things that we are suggesting and proposing, right, is really, when it comes to the portal, education. First, people are thirsty for knowledge and they want to know more. So if that portal is up to par and we're maximizing its capability, and you're diagnosed with something new, or you just want a little more research, we want people to feel comfortable in going into the portal, finding links that will help them understand maybe what they've been diagnosed with, provide a little more literature to make them feel more comfortable and really learn about what is happening to them, what are future steps, maybe other case studies of people that have gone through the same things they're going through. And if you find that at Baptist and in the portal, it's coming from a reputable place, right? So that makes you feel more comfortable. And secondly, when it comes to education, we need the consumers to know that the portal exists and the why, right? What is the purpose of my providers, of my nurses, of my techs, or even my primary care saying, this is where you need to go, right? Like, we need to educate all these 1.5 million people that come see us. We need to get to them and explain why the portal is what it should be, and where it's going and why it's useful.
And then we're also recommending that it's more interactive, being able to manage your, just everything in general as far as your medical history, appointment management, telehealth visits, and messaging capabilities. Make it where it's not just, going to see your doctor and then you have to wait, a few months before you can get a hold of them. Like, if I have a question or I have a concern or something's not right, I'm having a reaction to the medication, I need to be able to speak to someone and speak to them in a timely manner, not just being put on hold on the phone, wait an hour or whatever the case is. We all know that it's very difficult to get a hold of a doctor's office, to even, just as something as simple as scheduling an appointment can take a very long time. So being able to do that at your convenience, at your time, makes a difference. And then also it needs to be, it needs to have more of an engagement purpose. You need to be able to connect with your provider as a partnership. It's not just, this is what you have to do, but I'm an informed consumer. I know what I want. Let's work on this together, because that's going to increase the consumer satisfaction.
And with that, we'd like to first say thank you for allowing us on this platform and sharing and allowing us to share our research. And if there's any questions, we're here to answer.
Yeah, we got a few minutes, guys, if anybody has questions.
How does the portal work as far as like scheduling appointments? Because I know you have to get sick ahead of time, right? Because the doctors never have availability.
Right. It's like you have to know when you're going to get sick in about 2 months.
Yes, exactly.
So that's one of the things that we that we found, is that the patient portal has a list of past appointments and any current appointments you have now. But other than that, you can't make one. So we still have to find time to call, which we know that time is it's almost like 24 hours is not enough. So we have to find time to call in hopes that someone answers at a decent speed, because if there is an overflow, right, you're potentially waiting an hour to then make an appointment, which that phone call will also take a few minutes to make sure we find where the location you want to go to, the time that you prefer, right? So that's one of the issues that we find, where you're really holding medical records in the palm of your hand and a little bit of history, but it is not like in the now, right? So we're still almost dinosaur-like when it comes to making appointments.
Yeah, and kind of like just piggybacking on what Leo is saying, you want to be able, if we have telehealth capabilities or being able to do a virtual visit on this app, that'll be another way that if you are sick and you just don't want to go to your doctor's office, or you don't want to, if it's something like a cold or something that can be seen virtually, that'll be a great enhancement to the portal, because then you don't have to worry about going to a physical location. There can be a provider that can see you right then and there. So even though there are things that we do have, like care on demand, If you have too many apps, right, like you're not going to utilize them all. You want to have everything in like a one-stop shop. Like this is where I have to go and I can get everything done right here and then. So that's something that we are proposing, that is pretty much making it easily accessible. You don't have to think about it too much. You know, if you can't schedule an appointment at the location you want to see, well, at least there are options for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank
Baptist is lucky. to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, and thank
Absolutely.
you for having us.
Thank you for being here. Jalane, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was going to clap and just tell my students I'm so proud of them. They're so incredible. There have been some really nice presentations this morning.
Thanks for being here, guys. Thank you again. Okay.
Wait, how do I stop sharing?
There's a button somewhere, Leonor.
It's at the top. Go
Yeah,
to the top.
I think it's at the top.
I'm going. All right, checking all these. There, it was blocked by all of your beautiful faces. That's I didn't find it. There we go.
All right. So we got our next presenter, Carolina Leon, on empowering couples by integrating parenting styles. Carolina has been practicing since 2013, working with children and families in different environments. She's worked with at-risk youth, special needs children and their families, and couples in the court system. Let me mute somebody. She has a dual master's in mental health and marriage and families. She recently got into the role of qualified supervisor, which I'm sure she's fantastic at. Her specialties are working with children and couples. I enjoy treating the family system as I believe one small change can make a huge difference. I like that. And her passion lies heavily with children and parenting. When one parent can learn from their little ones and teach simultaneously, some fantastic transformation takes place. Her therapeutic approach is tailored to fit the family or individual's needs. She does not subscribe to one framework, but instead utilizes what framework could fit the individuals she works with best. She incorporates solution-focused CBT, Gottman methods when working with couples, and Bowen theory, to name a few. Furthermore, she is also a wife, a daughter, a mom, a sister, and wears various hats. I thought that said weaver for a minute, and I was like, I didn't know you weave. And she loves spending time with family, friends, and her English bulldog, Chunky. What a great name for an English bulldog. Carolina, did you need me to share your thing, or do you have it?
I have it, but if you want to share, that's fine too.
You take it away.
It's a poster presentation, so it's a little small, so I'm gonna try to enlarge it a little bit. There it is. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, do the slideshow. There you go. If you go to slideshow.
It's covered by this thing. Oh.
Yeah, just from Kurns. There you go.
Ah, okay.
There you go.
Okay, so thank you guys for being here. The title of it is Empowering Couples by Integrating Parenting Styles. How do I move this thing? Oh, there we go. Okay, and so what I was aiming to do was kind of merging Gottman therapy and a little bit of Bowen into parenting, right? And just those sort of transgenerational inheritances we have from our family origins. So how many of you have conflict in your relationship with your significant other? How do you guys manage that conflict, if anybody wants to chime in?
I can speak.
I'm
We
sorry,
have-
I'm muted. Oh, go ahead. I was saying that I manage my conflict through self-care. So I incorporate a lot of different self-care strategies. I enjoy meditating. I enjoy listening to music and reading. And I think when I'm stressed out, or even if I'm going through a conflict with a family or a friend, I resort to either one of those things.
Thank you, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
I think somebody else was speaking as well.
Yes, it was me. So I manage my conflict by having rules. So we have rules, me and my husband, no fighting after 6 or 7 p.m.
I love that.
One of the basic and main rules we have, and it really works.
Awesome. So marital conflict or just couple conflict insists, it exists in all couples, mine very much included. So when there is high conflict in the couple and then children arrive in an already high anxiety and complicated family system, it brings more stressor. Now, according to a study, and I could never pronounce these names right, it was based on Gottman method for healthy relationships to be able to manage the relationship and develop problem-solving skills. The intent is for these skills to be first managed by the couples and then transmitted to the children. So if you have a couple that is constantly fighting, arguing, screaming, then that is going to be the way the child is going to learn to communicate, versus modeling for the child. It's okay to disagree, but let's do it respectfully, right? So that's kind of the notion of it. So this will kind of explore how diffusing the conflict will help the couples connect and thus kind of trickle down to the children, and then they'll be able to handle conflict better. So Gottman therapy in couples and families is a research-based approach applied to a broad spectrum of problems encountered in everyday routine and activities. Now, one of the interesting things about Gottman couples therapy is that they do not work with couples who are in an active affair or domestic violence. So it is a couple that has conflict, disagreements, but there's not an active affair going on or domestic violence. So when couples enter the marriage at a high level of conflict, they expect the issues to somehow just magically resolve. And I've heard this a lot from the couples I work with. We thought if we got married, these issues would just magically disappear. How many of you think that works? That marriage is just a solution to get rid of these conflicts? I don't think anyone, right? And so that is a false pretense, right? This sort of Hollywood like perception that once you get married, everything just turns into unicorns and roses and that sort of thing. So the idea is, the therapist role is going to be redirecting the couple to focus on one another and not the therapist, and sort of be able to speak to each other respectfully. So in Gottman theory, it shows that most conflict in the relationship does not resolve. So 69% of it goes without resolved based on personality and needs. And how many of you can think about conflicts with your partner, with your spouse that has been resolved? Or how many of you think most of it is unresolved? And anybody can chime in because I can't really see you guys.
I think if you're doing it right, it doesn't get resolved all the time.
Agreed. I mean, I can speak for myself. My husband and I we're very different. You guys know I'm a therapist. He's an engineer, completely night and day. So most of our conflicts are not resolved. But the idea is kind of to agree to disagree and move on. Or when it comes to parenting, let's say this time we'll do it my way, next time we'll do it his way, right? And keeping a log, I think, is important, because otherwise then that also becomes part of of the conflict. Okay, but you went last time. No, I went last time. No, you both write it down. Who went? What was the parenting issue? And then you move forward. And that's one of the strategies when I give the families that I work with, they love. And it's in a log, they both sign it, so there's no confusion of who went first last time. And then it minimizes the conflict or the parenting disagreements. And so disagreements over child rearing could have been an increased risk for the cost of divorce. So that's another layer to parenting, right? The divorced parents. And all parents carry with them inadvertently their transgenerational inheritance. So whatever they brought on from their families, whether it's traditions or, you know, how they were raised. Well, this is how my mother did it. This is how my parents did it. That sort of bias, you know, for lack of a better word. And that's not to say all those things that our parents did are wrong, but the idea is we want to make it a 2.0, right? Make it a better version, and maybe discard those things that don't really work. So the purpose of what is different about Gottman's therapy, it's creating a family system of understanding and positive affirmations and exploring the couple's management skills, the couple's conflict management skills. Everybody argues, you know, but it's how you argue that is the key here. And finding shared meaning around child rearing, applying Gottman's method to couples therapy. Now, when it comes to conflict and management skills, I could share a little bit about my my conflict management that I realized because of Dr. Rudis. I would cut off, right? So this is where the Bowen piece comes in. I would shut down, I would not speak, you know, and I would speak to my husband maybe in a couple of days. And then we wouldn't talk about it. But that didn't solve anything, right? It just next time made it worse. So having that understanding and taking a look in the mirror, it's difficult, but it's very much needed. So what do I bring to the relationship that could be tweaked a little bit, or even just acknowledging, even sitting back and observing will create some of that change, right? So there are three main domains in Gottman therapy: constructive conflict, friendship, intimacy, and positive affect. These are the second premise, and finally shared meaning. The most straightforward way to analyze Gottman method is the sound house. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. I should have gotten a picture of it. The sound house of Gottman. It's kind of in layers, and there's the roof and then the rest of it, right? And so where the top level is shared meaning. There are 9 parts to the relationship house theory. But the top level, the roof, is that shared meaning. So every couple has a shared meaning or a shared goal or something they share in particular, which is what got them to be together to begin with. Or how many of you have absolutely nothing in common with your partner or no shared meaning? Now, that's not to say you have to be the same. As I said, myself and my husband, we are night and day, but we do have shared meaning, shared goals. That's kind of the gist of it. So some of the specific interventions that talks about in Gottman therapy are identifying the 4 horsemen. So the 4 horsemen is criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Now, I take stonewalling very much like Bowen's theory of cutoff. It's the same thing, different wording. And it's where you just literally what it says, you put up a wall and you're not going to talk about it until it dies down. Defensiveness is kind of becoming the victim. And when you're feeling attacked, you reverse the script. Contempt is attacking the sense of self with an intent to insult or mentally abuse or manipulate the partner. So a lot of times you'll see that with money, you know, if one or the other, if one of the individuals in the couple doesn't work, then they'll kind of use that as a manipulation, right? And criticism, verbally attacking your partner or character. Now, in Gottman therapy, he says if contempt is the main sort of way they argue, then that is a good predictor for a failed relationship. So that tends to be the worst type of, I guess, conflict. So a way to do this is positive intervention. So the 4 horsemen are kind of the don'ts, and then the positive perspectives are the antidote, right? So the antidote to criticism is using I statements, or, you know, looking at yourself in the mirror versus creating the blame. For contempt, the antidote is creating a culture of appreciation for one another. So how many of your couples, or how many of you guys have ever thought of creating a culture of appreciation with your relationship? And I absolutely love that one, because when you start looking at the positive in a relationship, then it makes a difference. So think about that first year, that dating year, right? The honeymoon phase, where everything was positive. There was nothing that bothered you. Everything was good. If they left the socks on the floor, oh, it's okay, I'll pick them up, right? It was all good. But then later on, those same behaviors that you found endearing at the beginning, they're not so endearing 10, 15 years down the line, right? Defensiveness, the antidote is taking responsibility, accepting your partner's perspective, and offering an ongoing apology when needed, right? And the last one, stonewalling, is the antidote to this is being able to take a break, or 20, 30 minutes. In Gottman therapy, when they are in the session, he actually splits them up, or she, because it's a couple, and will give them something to read, or just, okay, we're going to take a breather, just to kind of distract them from the high levels of anxiety and emotions. And then they go back to it. So they don't just, okay, we're done with it. But the idea is to be able to go back with it with a thoughtful frame of mind. So some other positive perspectives or ways to intervene is building love maps, meaning, you know, trying to understand one another inner psychology. And they have a great app. It's called Gottman Card Decks. And it does that, building love maps. So who were your best friends? What are your dreams? What are some goals that you haven't reached yet? What are some goals that you have reached? And it's just getting to know your partner deeper, right? And maybe there's some things you'll find out, and asking open-ended questions. And you want to update this from time to time, because we all know goals change, dreams change. And you want to be able to update this in your own love map of your partner. So turning towards one another, or creating positive bids for emotional connection. So an example of this could be when a husband or wife or partner gives a cup of coffee in the morning with their favorite pastry. You can turn and greet with a smile and say, oh, thank you, I really like it. Or if you're turning away from that bid, then you would say, oh, it's okay, but this is really not the pastry that I wanted. So then that will kind of cut off that behavior and not allow for your partner to continue to do these nice things. So turning into the bid is almost like giving a positive affirmation. And then sharing fondness and admiration for one another. And so in doing all of these things and modeling these things for your children, this is how then they will learn to deal with conflict and understand that it's not just the screaming or the yelling or the I'm right and you're right. No, it's coming to a compromise. That's really what it is. And let me see if I can scoot this over. And then this is what we talked about, emotional heritage and parenting. So how many of you guys have experienced talking to a child or children only to realize that they have just uttered your exact words or phrases, or something that your parents said to you at some point during your childhood? So that's just part of it, right? What was one thing I used to hear a lot? Oh, if you're under my roof, you're under my rules, right? You're just a guest here. Those sort of things that we hear from parents when they're reacting, when they're emotional. Bless you, Guillermo. And sometimes I'll say it to my kid, oh, you're just a guest here. You know, we allowed for you to live here. And then I realized, oh no, my dad used to say that to me. but I say it to her jokingly, right? I never say it to her in anger. And, you know, another example is if you had a strict mom, or I'm originally from Colombia, and did not allow for you to speak in an argument unless you were permitted to do so. That's also something that really is maladaptive to children, because it kind of shows them you don't have a voice, so you can't speak unless spoken to. So I definitely allow for my little one to speak to me while we're in an argument, but I always tell her respectfully, you know, we can have an argument, disagreement, but respectfully. And again, it goes back to, as parents, if we're modeling all these for them, then they'll be able to demonstrate it themselves. And I think that's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions, comments. How do I stop share? There we go.
So are you saying that working on the marriage is important for parenting?
Of course. Of course.
How do you talk to parents about that? How do you present that?
You know, when I'm working with couples or particular when I typically work around parenting. Like the child is the problem, right? That's what the parents come in with. And so how do I present that is, well, before COVID, I used to go to the home and I would just tell them, you know, let's observe, let's see what's going on here. And, you know, a lot of times they weren't acknowledging their behavior, or they're jumping to a child if they were throwing themselves on the floor because they didn't get their toy that they wanted. So a lot of the behaviors that children demonstrate are reinforced by parents, unfortunately. So that's how we do it. Now, virtually, it is a little bit more difficult, but it's still done. So I do the same, you know, put a camera or put the phone or whatever you're on where you guys don't have to hold it, and just let's see what you guys do. What is the behavior? Show me. And then again, it's pinpointing or kind of having them discover, well, what are you bringing to this? You know, why is this child behaving this way? And then we get into, well, how do you guys resolve conflict? And tell me about your family of origin. And, you know, how was it resolved then? And then they start making the connections and they're like, oh, I became my mother, or I became my father, you know, that sort of thing. So it is interesting when they start connecting the dots. And then that in itself instills some form of change. Teri, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you that, you know, it's funny. A lot of the things that you said kind of resonated. And when you talked about coming into the house, it reminded me of that old TV show with the nanny. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but that nanny would come into the house and the parents would try to, you know, kind of adapt their behaviors to what she was recommending that they would do with the kids and stuff. And it seemed funny in some points, but it's only when you see other people and what they're doing that you can oftentimes see yourself and then say, oh man, I do that. Yeah. Or, oh my God, I remember being, you know, that happening to me when I was little. So yeah, I was very surprised. I did not log on this morning thinking that I would hear something that would actually cause me to be very introspective about my own parenting. So thank you so much, Carolina.
Of course. Thank you for your feedback.
I'm pretty sure it was called The Nanny, by the way, the show.
I think so.
It was very insightful.
Well, thank you guys.
Well, Carolina, where are you working right now where you work with these parents and kids?
I have my own practice. So
Okay.
I work with early steps. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's early intervention for kids 0 to 3. But then when they age out, a lot of them will continue. Or, you know, I've gone to schools and kind of presented on similar topics, and then I'll get referrals from there. And since before COVID, I used to do a lot of therapy in schools, the teachers or the directors, they would, you know, send the kiddos my way, or the parents more so, because it's never the child. It's always a parenting issue. It's always a system issue. It's not necessarily my kid has a behavior here, fix them. You know, it doesn't work that way.
I hear that. You get them that way though.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's how I get them.
And then you go in through the side door and
Yes.
say, hey, it might be you.
But you know, just to let you know, it's not just like that, boom, okay, it's you guys. No, it takes a little bit. And so first we may work with some of the behaviors of the children. Now, it is a little different if the kid is on the spectrum or Down syndrome, those sort of already diagnoses, then it looks a little different, but still the parents play a huge part, right? But it does take some finesse to get in there and let the parents know, hey, maybe you.
Wait, how did you get introduced to Gottman? I don't know much about it. I've heard it works.
I'm not sure. I just picked up a book one day at Barnes from Gottman, and then I just kept reading up on his stuff. I've done one of the workshops. He has three
different tiers, right?
Three different tiers to be Gottman certified. But it takes it's a quite an investment and a lot of hours. So I couldn't be doing that right now while doing the PhD program.
I hear that.
But I love the similarities with Bowen therapy. That's what I love about Gottman as well. Even though they're not too kind on one another, but they're so very much alike. They just call it different things.
What do you see as the similarity? How would you talk about it?
So when I did the Gottman, I guess the first introduction or the first level of it, they actually talked about Bowen, and they're like, Bowen wants to take out emotion in couples, and how can you do that? And I felt almost like a bashing sort of tone, and I was like, oh, but that's not the intention of Bowen. It's to bring awareness to that thoughtful mind. And they're like, oh, you follow Bowen? And I was like, well, I didn't know what to say. You know, at some point I was like, I don't subscribe to any one theory. And I firmly believe that. I think they all at some shape or form intertwine. And so I think there is a misconception that Bowen tends to take away that emotion. And I don't think that's it at all. It just means to bring a thoughtful awareness to that emotion. And Gottman therapy aims to do the same.
Hold on, somebody's they got it. That's my understanding too, Carolina. That's how I think about it.
Now, the interesting thing about Gottman is that it is evidence-based, you know, not to say Bowen isn't, but they have like a science lab. They call it the Love Lab, where they set up people, I don't know what they're called, but it measures their heartbeat. So when they get past a certain point, then they give them a timeout so they can calm down. So it's really interesting.
So they do biofeedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
That would be cool. Does anybody out there do biofeedback with the clients? That would be so interesting. Especially with couples.
Yeah, definitely.
What are you thinking right now? Your heart rate's about 190.
Like, hey, we need a timeout.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for presenting today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, let's do this. We have 5 minutes till 11. If you guys need to go to the restroom, take a break, grab a cup of coffee, go do it. And we'll start the next one in 5 minutes. Hello, Dr. Machuca.
Hello.
Hello, is that Rose? Hello, Rose.
I was on mute. I was on mute. Hi, good
Okay.
morning, Guillermo.
Good morning. Good morning.
Is it Guy? Did I pronounce it correctly, Guillermo?
You did, yeah, you got it. Good morning, Khadijah.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to see you too. I'm happy that Rose asked for the pronunciation of your name because that has been a question on my mind for a long time.
I go by many names, Khadijah, so it's okay.
All right, perfect. But I love your name though. It's perfect.
Thank you. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Awesome. All right, let's get started, guys. So our next presenter is Khadijah Mcclure, counseling in the transgender community. Khadijah is 24 and a graduate student in the counseling program with a clinical mental health track. She is an international student from Guyana with a detailed background in psychology. She spends her free time volunteering as she is passionate about giving back to the community and advocating for those who need their voices heard. With that, she is interested in feminist advocacy, social relationships, and human sexuality and gender identity. Once she completes her program, her goal is to work with community agencies to continue to promote social justice in her community. So welcome, Khadijah.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Guillermo. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you all see?
We got it.
All right, perfect. So hello, everyone. As Guillermo said, my name is Khadijah Mcclure, and I'm super happy and thrilled to be able to present to you today. And I also wanted to pay homage to the previous presenters. You've all done such an excellent job so far. And today I will be presenting on the counseling in the transgender community. And I think that this presentation is very timely as we're coming to a close of Trans Awareness Week, which is November 13th to the 19th. And today is actually Transgender Day of Remembrance, where we are memorializing those who were murdered as a result of transphobia. So I think that today was a great day to do this presentation, and I hope that you all learn at least one thing today. So let's get started because our time is limited. So our goals today are to understand, highlight, discuss, and advocate. We want to understand the current issues in the trans community as well as their unique needs. And we'd also want to highlight transgender folks' experience with counseling and discuss the attitudes and competencies that we as counselors and future counselors can adopt when working with trans clients. And from the information that we gained today, I hope that we're able to begin to advocate for this community. So before we begin, I always love doing an icebreaker. I think it's a great way to be present with the group. So we have a quick activity called the gender-bread person. And on the left, we have 4 terms. We have sex, identity, gender expression, and attraction. And on the right, we have this beautiful gender-bread person that is unlabeled. And we see a brain, a heart, we have the outward expression, and we have an anatomical symbol below. So all I need you guys to do is just try to help me, or we could all work together to explore which term will fit well with the label. So you guys could either unmute yourselves to respond, or you could either say it in the chat. So first we'll start with this brain image at the top here. Which one do you think will be fitting for this one? Go ahead, Rose. You're muted.
My first thought, Khadijah, was identity.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
I don't know. I guess I just think of it as more of a thought process. You know, when I think about my own identity, I think about it originating in the brain, but I tend to overanalyze and overthink. So maybe that's why I think, you know, most of these components originate in the brain. But that was just my first kind of gut instinct.
Well, Rose, you're right on track. I will further explain these terms in the next slide, but just for the sake of time, we'll go on to the next one where we have the heart. Which one do you guys think will be suited for the heart?
I would think attraction.
Sorry? I didn't get that.
Try it again. I think somebody else was unmuted, so if you were speaking, try again. She wrote attraction.
Attraction, okay, right. And well, like I said before, I'll further explain why the attraction is suitable for that heart image. But all of you who are saying attraction, you're very right. And what about gender expression? Where do you think gender expression would go?
The whole
Somebody,
body?
Daniela said the armpit. Yes.
The whole
Exactly.
body?
Well, it's sorry.
The whole body?
Yes, thank you, Maria. Exactly. It's the entire outward. I know it's pointing to the armpit, but it's actually the entire outward section of the gendered person right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but yes, you're absolutely right. And last, we have the anatomical image at the bottom here. Which one do you guys think? This one will be really easy because we did all the terms already.
Sex.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Thank you. So let me go to the next slide. So you all were very right. We have here the label gender-bred person where we have identity, attraction, expression, and sex. So first we'll start with sex, which is the physical or the anatomical makeup of our bodies. And I really wanted to differentiate between sex and gender because sex is physical, it's physiological and anatomical, whereas gender is a societal construct that we as humans use to characterize femininity versus masculinity. And then there's gender expression, which is how we present ourselves to the world. So the clothes we wear, how we do our hair, how we do our makeup. And then there's also gender identity, as Rose said, it's a psychological sense of identity. It's how we think of ourselves, like who do we see ourselves as what we identify as. And last, there's attraction, which is who we're drawn to, who we're attracted to. And attraction is also called sexual orientation. And I wanted to say that sexual orientation or attraction is very different or independent from your gender identity. So for example, we could have a trans person who could be straight, who could be gay, who could be bisexual or queer. So those two things are not one and the same. So thank you guys for participating in this icebreaker. So we can now move on to why we need to pay attention to this issue, like why we as counselors and professors and future counselors should care about this community. Well, this community of people, transgender people, they face discrimination in every walk of life. They face severe stigma and systemic inequality on a daily basis. And I have some statistics here. Most of it is from an organization called the Trevor Project, which is an LGBTQ+ organization. They did a survey this year, actually shedding light on the challenges that queer LGBTQ youth face. Youth between 13 and 24. And these statistics to me were so shocking, where we see 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide, with more than half, 52% of trans and non-binary youth a part of that statistic. We also see a high level of generalized anxiety symptoms and major depressive symptoms, and about 85% stated that COVID negatively affected their mental health. And the American Psychiatric Association also found that Black, Hispanic or Latino, Native American, and mixed race trans folk are at an increased risk of suicide attempts compared to white American transgender youth. So I could go on and on with these statistics, but you get the gist of how prevalent the issue of mental health is in this community. And we as counselors, we need to do something. We need to advocate for this community. So now we'll do a brief overview of the current affairs. And I wanted to start off with a few terms so we would know what we're talking about in this presentation. And first, I wanted to start off with defining what transgender means. So transgender is an umbrella term for those whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned to them at birth. Remember, we just talked about sex being the anatomical makeup of our bodies, and the gender identity is the psychological aspect. So those who identify as transgender, there's a difference between the two. And some trans folk undergo surgery, but not all can or will take these steps. So, and a trans identity, somebody who identifies as trans, is not dependent on their physical expression, their physical gender expression, or their medical procedures. There's also the term of transmasculine, which is used to describe those who are assigned the female sex at birth but identify with a masculine gender identity. And the transfeminine, those who are assigned the male sex at birth but identify with a feminine gender identity. And last, there's the non-binary. They're non-binary people who feel as though their gender identity and or their expression fall outside of this binary view of gender. So I collected some research. I did some research on the existing literature on the existing issues in the trans community. And the first and most prevalent issue is their lack of access to healthcare and their mistreatment in the healthcare that they do receive. And trans folk experience overt discrimination, such as being refused health treatment by their healthcare providers. Their healthcare providers aren't using affirmative language, and they just generally lack trans health knowledge. And there are providers, there are doctors, healthcare providers who perform examinations or tests just out of curiosity. For example, with trans men, we find that doctors are doing pelvic examinations just because they're curious about it. And in the United States alone, a lot of trans people don't have this access to healthcare because they lack health insurance or other means to pay for medical care. There's also more than a quarter of transgender folk who have been refused healthcare by a doctor or other providers because of their identity. And like I said before, a lot of these providers lack that trans healthcare knowledge. And about 29% of trans people stated that they had to teach their healthcare providers about their transgender health issues. We also see the issue of mental health and suicide that I previously talked about in the Why Should We Advocate slide, where we have events like coming out and gender identity exploration, which could lead to a lot of chronic stress. There's also the experience of harassment, violence, and discrimination that could contribute to a diminished mental health and especially lead to internalized transphobia. And from the Trevor Project, we saw that nearly half of LGBTQ youth this year alone wanted mental health care, but they never got it. They did not receive it. There's also the issue of housing discrimination and homelessness, and where we're seeing a lot of people experiencing houselessness because they were evicted or they don't have this access to housing simply because of their gender identity. There's also the issue of violence, where about 54% of trans people have experienced intimate partner violence, and about 47% have been sexually assaulted. Just last year, about 27 trans people died simply because of their gender identity. There are also other issues such as identity documents, poverty, discrimination in public settings, abuse from the police or in prison, and also family acceptance and employment. So for this project, for this presentation, I interviewed a few transgender people who live in South Florida. And I interviewed them simply because as much as I get information from the literature, as much as I could go on Google Scholar and look at the existing journal articles, I still wanted to get that personal perspective from real people with real experiences in the community itself. And I'm not saying that, you know, a small group of trans folk would have the same experiences as everybody in the community, but it's still important to have that personal perspective from them. So from the interview that I did, I found 6 key themes where we have femphobia, which is especially existent for trans men, where in order to be seen as real, they have to dress a certain way, they have to dress mask presenting. But there are a lot of androgynous or femme presenting trans men who are shut down because of this transphobia. There's also the issue of violence towards trans women, and there's a heightened stigma towards trans women, which makes them more susceptible to violence due to toxic masculinity or patriarchal standards. There's also the case of invisibility of trans issues in the media. There's the issue of microaggressions, which are comments or actions that would subtly express a prejudiced attitude towards trans folk simply because their membership of that group. And one of the interviewees actually mentioned that people often misgender them or call them the wrong pronouns on purpose. And another interviewee stated that he's openly trans, but he still faces this microaggression from his own family or his community or other healthcare providers. There's also the issue of intra-community discrimination, which was very interesting. And this refers to discrimination coming from within the LGBTQ community itself, where you have other members of this community stigmatizing trans folk because of their identity. Interestingly, one of the interviewees stated that he is trans, his sister is a lesbian, but she still stigmatizes him because she's okay with lesbians, she's okay with mask presenting women, but she thinks that transitioning or identifying as trans or going all the way is wrong. And this is also very common in dating culture within the community as well. There's also the issue of lack of accommodation in public settings. One of the interviewees actually mentioned the very present issue of trans folk in access to public restrooms or other public spaces. And I also interviewed these people, and I wanted to know about their experience with counseling, because at the end of the day, we're all counselors. This is what we're interested in when we're working with this community. And we found that the respondents stated that there was a lot of issue with the counselors' lack of experience with trans clients. One of the interviewees mentioned that when they outed themselves, when they outed their gender identity to the counselor, there was this overt display of biasness, and the counselor admitted that they don't really have that experience with trans clients, so they can't really help as best as they should. And also there's the issue of counselors, because of this lack of knowledge, only focusing on gender dysphoria and pathologizing these clients, which makes them feel abnormal and uncomfortable and wouldn't want to go back to counseling. There's also, like, connecting to the first point, the issue of microaggressions from counselors. One of the interviewees stated that a lot of trans people suffer from this depression and anxiety, but they still avoid counseling because a lot of the therapists tend to display that overt discomfort with trans issues. And several of the other interviewees mentioned that the counselors seem visibly uncomfortable when they talk about their real trans experiences, their real lifestyles, their real issues, which obviously in turn would make them feel abnormal or there's something wrong with them. And trust me, your trans clients could tell when you're uncomfortable when they're talking about their issues. And lastly, there's the issue of assuming that the client's problem is only gender identity related. This is also in the literature as well, where a lot of counselors would simply assume that the client's presenting problem always relates back to their gender identity, when that's not necessarily the case. You know, you could have clients who come in with other issues, they come in with other concerns, and as counselors, we should just be open and willing to listen and just be in a state of curiosity about what they have to say. So from everything that we've discussed so far, I would say that these are the unique needs of the community. I won't go into them for the sake of time, but we get the gist from everything that we said so far. So I looked up, there's the Association of the LGBT Issues in Counseling, and they developed a very long list of counseling competencies that we should adopt and for working with trans clients. And these issues are, these competencies are all based on a wellness perspective, a strengths-based approach. And based on the issues that we've discussed, I've selected 5 relevant competencies that I think we should pay attention to, but there's a long list, so keep that in mind, and I'll also provide that resource later on. So one of the first and most important competency that we as counselors and future counselors should have is to have that understanding of the importance of using appropriate language, such as chosen names or the correct names or pronouns with our clients, and also providing an affirmative space or an affirming environment for those clients. You know, we should create safe spaces in a subtle way for when those clients walk into our office, they're comfortable, they feel safe. So I wanted to, I know we're running low on time, but I really wanted to know if one person could say maybe an example of how we could show or exemplify this competency with our clients. Nobody wants to give it a try. Don't go all at once.
I'll try. I'll try,
Khadijah.
If you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So I think when providing counseling to people from the community, I think it's about creating a safe environment in terms of like maybe the atmosphere of your office, maybe it being the colors or different things that literature that you might present, offering like I don't know, maybe decorating the office in certain LGBTQ plus community flags, just so that they can know that it's a safe space, a welcome area for them to be in.
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct, Tara. Great job. And that's actually what I was about to say after. Something as simple as displaying a pride flag on your desk is comforting to clients that are part of this community, that when they walk into this office, they don't even have to ask you, but they could see it for themselves that you're openly supportive of this community. And another competency that we should have is to be familiar with the resources in your community that you could connect your trans clients with. We as counselors should know the existing organizations that help with legal issues, housing, employment, or even peer support, so that we're able to connect our clients. And we can simply do this by networking with people in our community, be familiar with the relevant laws or acts that could possibly help our clients, collecting business cards, keeping them in like a small directory in your office so they're readily available for those clients. There's also the competency that we need to identify the gender normative assumptions in certain theories or developmental theories that we use. A lot of these theories exclude the trans experience, and we need to be very cognizant of that when we're working with our trans clients. And a great example is Freud's psychosexual theory of development, where he spoke about the Oedipus and the Electra complexes, which is a very binary view of gender and sexuality as well. So we just need to be critical of the assessments or theories that we're using when we're working with these clients. There's also the competency of recognizing and acknowledging intersectionality with trans clients. Trans people have other identities. It could be race, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, age, and so on. So we always need to be mindful of this, especially in our intake where we're doing our biopsychosocial assessment or other types of intakes assessment. Be cognizant of that multicultural aspect of our clients so that we could understand how they come into play with their experiences in the world. And we also need to recognize, be aware of your own biases, recognize how you might have internalized prejudice or discrimination against this community. Be cognizant of your own values about heteronormativity or, you know, transphobia or racism and stuff like that. And the only way that we could do that or practice that is always being mindful and really reflect on our experiences and the things that we say to others. So like I said, I always want to get the interviewee's perspective on what they would want from an ideal counselor. Like when they walk into a counseling office, what do they want to see? Like what would allow them or feel comfortable to stay in that office with that counselor? And these are very feasible responses, and I think that we should all incorporate them into our daily life so that it makes it easier for us to connect to these clients when they do come into our spaces. The first is to be patient with yourself and your clients. The interviewee said that a lot of trans clients are still figuring they're still figuring things out. So you just have to be patient with them when they express themselves. And you also have to be patient with yourself as a counselor because you don't know everything. They know that you don't know everything, but don't pretend like you know everything. So just be patient and be open to their experiences and just be judgment free. You also need to increase your knowledge of trans issues, and you just as we're doing now, we're learning more about the community, we're learning more about their issues, and we also need to immerse ourselves in their communities. Go to their events, go to Pride, go to different forums that speak about trans issues. You can't learn about this community from the outside. You actually have to go in and participate and, you know, have some informal interactions with trans clients. And we also need to openly advocate for our trans people. Just as Tara said, have a pride flag in your office. Display that you're a queer safe counselor on your website or on your business cards or on your social media. And we also need to treat our trans clients with respect. You know, they want to feel like they're a collaborative part of this process. They want to feel as if you're listening to them and you're respecting their views and what they have to say to you. So now that we learn about these issues, we learn about the competencies that we should have and what the clients want us to have, how could we learn more? How could we advocate more? And this is my advice to you. We can learn more through immersion. Go to cultural events, get out of your office, go into the community, go participate. You could go to Pride, which is in June. There's also Acknowledging Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is today. And there's also Trans Day of Visibility, which is March 31st. Also know the community resources. There's this lovely group called Trans Social that I actually attended a support group earlier in the year. They help with peer support and engaging. They just have like support groups on Zoom and in person too, where they just have, interactions, just casual interactions. There's also Ariana Center, which is run by the amazing Ariana Lint. It's a trans-led organization that helps with legal issues such as name changes or identity documents, as well as housing and healthcare. And you could just read literature. These are amazing fictional and non-fictional books. There's also Transgender Quarterly that gives a lot of information on trans issues and lifestyles. There is the LGBT issues and counseling list of competencies that I've provided here and also exist in journal articles. And you can simply watch TV shows. There's Pose that I love very much. There's Euphoria and Orange is the New Black, just to get a gist of trans lifestyle and trans experiences. And with that, this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I would love to hear your questions or comments.
Great presentation, Khadijah.
Thank you, Dr. Machuca.
I learned something new, the femphobia. I actually never read about it or heard about it, particularly for trans men. And that speaks of our biases sometimes. So we're so familiar with even certain identities in the transgender community, like, you know, like transgender women, they are more visible than transgender men. Yes. So of course, the issues that affect transgender men are less visible. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. That's a great point, Dr. Machika. And that's especially why I wanted to interview these real people, because, you know, as much as we could read articles and what's in the existing literature, there are still people who have to go out in the world every day and live these experiences. So it's important to hear from them.
Hi, Khadija. I just wanted to say I really loved the genderbread man. I was thinking that it was such a beautiful way to present the issue, even to children,
Yes.
because, you know, they may be already questioning, and, you know, you kind of want to have a way to introduce them into the subject. And yeah, I mean, I just thought that was really incredible. So thank you for introducing that concept, and great presentation.
Thank you so much. I saw it and I was like, this is so simple. It's so interactive and creative. I had to use it. Thank you.
And
so
you could
much,
use
Rose.
it with your future clients too. Like that would be a great way
Absolutely.
to integrate into counseling.
Absolutely.
Khadijah, that was wonderful. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Yeah, you did a great job, and your smile is infectious, and you need to go get a PhD and write that dissertation.
I'll think about it. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you. All right, so our next presenter is Rose Yesha. Identifying, I'm sorry, did I pronounce it wrong? Yesha? Rose?
Oh, no, it was perfect.
Oh, so identifying harm from psychotropic drugs, an urgent call to action for mental health counselors. Rose Yesha holds a PhD in information systems. How cool is that? With a concentration in health informatics and behavioral health analytics. Currently, she is pursuing a Master of Science in clinical mental health counseling. Dr. Yesha is interested in alternative approaches to mental health treatment. She advocates for greater awareness of iatrogenic injury from psychiatric treatment. So welcome, Rose, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna share my screen with everyone. Oops. Trying to figure it out here. All right. Can everyone see that?
We don't see anything yet, Rose.
No, not yet.
I'm trying to, oh, okay, I got it. All right, I just have to click share.
There you go.
And then from, all right. Does that work? Everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I will be presenting today on identifying harm from psychotropic drugs, an urgent call to action for mental health counselors. This is just a disclaimer that this presentation is meant for informational purposes only. This presentation does not constitute medical advice, and individuals should discuss any changes to their current medication protocol with their physician. So this is just a background of the issue, just, you know, giving some facts to everybody about the current situation in terms of psychiatric drug prescribing in the United States. So currently, nearly 65 million people in the United States are taking a prescribed psychiatric medication. So this would account to approximately 1 in every 5 people. The most common types of psychiatric drugs prescribed include antidepressants, anxiolytics, which is more of an umbrella term for benzodiazepines, hypnotics, Z drugs, etc. The next class would be antipsychotics, then mood stabilizers, and psychostimulant medications. Currently, antidepressants represent the second most commonly prescribed medication in the United States. This is across all classes of prescribed medications, not just psychiatric medications. So that's just something really important to know, just to think about the magnitude of antidepressant prescriptions in our country. Most antidepressants are prescribed by primary care physicians that have limited training on treating mental health conditions. This is obviously a really big problem because, they may not have the same training that psychiatrists do, and they may not be, equipped to deal with side effects or any negative reactions or dosing changes, etc. All major classes of psychiatric medication carry the risk of physiological dependency, even when taken as prescribed. I think that a lot of people are under the impression that if they're taking a medication at the dose at which their doctor told them to, they're really not at risk for becoming dependent. That's actually not true. Also, antidepressants have always been thought of as these medications that don't cause dependency. Over time, the literature has proved that that's not true. I think people, originally thought that, benzodiazepines and perhaps stimulant medications were the only drugs that could cause dependency, but we've now seen that antidepressants can cause dependency, sometimes very quickly, and they can also produce really extreme withdrawal reactions. So individuals may find it difficult or actually impossible to stop their psychiatric medication. This may be due to debilitating withdrawal symptoms, not relapse. This is something that a lot of doctors have a really difficult time identifying. Is it withdrawal or is it a return of their mental health conditions? And yes, of course, there are times when, stopping the psychiatric medication could result in return of the original mental health conditions, but there are many times when this is misdiagnosed, and this can be really detrimental because the person can go on to receive more psychiatric medications and perhaps incorrect diagnoses that are just not, that they're not consistent with what's actually happening. Discontinuing psychiatric medications can be a much longer and arduous process than the current guidelines suggest. A lot of guidelines will say that people can come off their antidepressant or perhaps benzodiazepine drug in a few weeks. And the reality is it can take months or even years for people to come off, depending on the difficulty of withdrawal. And one of the most important points that I want to highlight for this presentation is that counselors lack training in the proper identification of adverse drug reactions, iatrogenesis, and psychiatric drug withdrawal. So what are adverse drug reactions? So adverse drug reactions are harmful and unintended events that occur following the use of medications. Adverse drug reactions are extremely underreported. ADRs with psychiatric drugs are often misrepresented as symptoms of certain mental health disorders. The most common ADRs that are reported with psychiatric drugs include insomnia, increased anxiety, brain zaps. Brain zaps are actually a hallmark, especially with benzodiazepines and antidepressants. There are these sharp electric shock sensations in the brain. Some people think that they're having a seizure. There are people who have thought maybe they have a brain tumor. They've gotten all sorts of unnecessary brain imaging, like MRIs, EEGs, when in reality it was their medication. This has actually been validated in the literature, this phenomenon of brain zaps. But that being said, I found that a lot of counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists even, they don't really know much about it, and they may dismiss it as anxiety or headaches, and they may not take it seriously. The rest of the symptoms include nausea, depersonalization, agitation, and suicidal ideations. So what are the implications of these adverse drug reactions? So clients are often told that their adverse drug reactions are psychosomatic. And I think that this can be very damaging because these symptoms are very real. So when they hear, this is psychosomatic, it's kind of maybe all in your head or it's part of your anxiety, then the client may not realize that they're being harmed by their medication. Another implication is that clients may be encouraged to continue taking their medications despite the adverse drug reactions. This can obviously be very harmful because if they're already being injured by the drug, continuing to take it may, injure them further. Also, clients with ADRs are subject to being labeled treatment resistant and or non-compliant. So this issue of treatment resistance, when you're labeled as being treatment resistant, this is kind of, I guess, more of a general way of saying that you're not responsive to treatment when in fact you are being harmed by the drug, or if a patient is, labeled as non-compliant, there may be very good reasons for them, not to be in compliance with their medication if they're getting, very serious side effects. So clients with adverse drug reactions may experience polydrugging. And this is an approach that involves a lot of additional prescription medications to try and mitigate the side effects of the original medication. This can potentially work. There could potentially be a medicine that could at least stabilize somebody, at least for a short time, but often it results in one prescription quickly turning into 5 or 6 or even 7 prescriptions, and just exacerbating the entire situation for the client that may be struggling. So iatrogenesis. So a lot of you may not be familiar with this term. I wasn't until I actually, did a lot of research in this area. So iatrogenesis is defined by an injury or illness that directly results from medical treatment. The prevalence of iatrogenesis from psychiatric drugs is significant. A review by the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Prescribed Drug Dependence, this is in England, suggested that around 4 million people in England may experience sleep problems, anxiety, and hallucinations when withdrawing from antidepressant. For approximately 1.8 million people, these symptoms could be severe. Conditions related to iatrogenic injury may persist for months, years, or indefinitely. Individuals may endure days, months, or years of exponential tapers, delayed neurotoxicity, and protracted symptoms. And by delayed neurotoxicity, that is discussing syndromes that may occur even a long time after the patient may have taken their last antidepressant dose or antipsychotic dose or benzodiazepine dose. So they may actually feel okay, 12 months after their last dose, and then they may actually start to develop some of these protracted conditions. So what is protracted withdrawal syndrome? So this is actually something that, again, I haven't found that a lot of counselors or psychologists or mental health professionals are familiar with. So it's defined by a withdrawal that lasts at least 18 months following the discontinuation of psychiatric medications. Again, very few clinicians validate this experience from psychiatric medication, and the most pervasive forms of iatrogenic injury from psychiatric drugs include akathisia, tardive dyskinesia, and post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. I have noticed that, texts for mental health have started to include akathisia and tardive dyskinesia more prominently. But again, I would think that, just the average person, clinician or not, they are very unlikely to be familiar with many of these terms. So psychiatric drug withdrawal. So I actually did a deep dive into the DSM-5 because I wanted to know, if there was any information about, this condition within the DSM, and sure enough, there was. So the DSM-5 designates the experience of antidepressant withdrawal as antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. In previous editions, I actually learned that it did have it termed as antidepressant withdrawal. I think the change was perhaps to make it sound maybe less scary to patients. That just, that's my speculation. The DSM-5 states that the prevalence of antidepressant discontinuation syndrome is unknown. The DSM-5 also states that patients who have had a single experience of withdrawal from antidepressants may decide to continue their medication indefinitely, just because it's so difficult to deal with go through the process of tapering and withdrawal. I read a paper called The Patient Voice by Guy et al. This is a publication in 2020, and included a lot of major themes. Just a lack of information given to patients about the risk withdrawal. So, no proper informed consent, doctors being poorly informed about the best method of tapering, doctors failing to recognize the symptoms of withdrawal, patients being diagnosed with relapse of the underlying medical condition or other medical illnesses other than withdrawal, and patients seeking advice outside of mainstream healthcare, including the use of online forums, which I'll get into a little bit later. So yeah, there's a lot of issues here. And I think, the takeaway really is that a lot of the time, the patient may be in session with their psychiatrist or therapist, and they may not be taken seriously. So akathisia. So this was a term I actually wasn't familiar with until maybe about a couple years ago. Akathisia is an extremely distressing neurological disorder characterized by severe agitation and an inability to remain still and an overwhelming sense of terror. It can easily lead to people becoming suicidal and even homicidal. It's far more common than has been reported in the past. Some people will experience this condition for years, or they could go on to experience it indefinitely. And I actually have a video. I'm hoping this will work. Maybe I'll play it after the presentation is over. This is just about akathisia, so people could get an idea of what it was like. So tardive dyskinesia. So this is another really serious form of iatrogenic injury, and it's characterized by a movement disorder that causes involuntary repetitive body movements. The presentation of TD may also include involuntary vocalizations. It can manifest in the form of akathisia, tics, dystonia, tremor, chorea, or a combination of different involuntary movements. It affects an estimated 500,000 people in the United States. You know, it's obviously a really big deal. It's a very prevalent issue. And in a recent survey of patients taking antipsychotics and other medications, 58% were not aware that antipsychotics could cause involuntary movements or TD. So that's an overwhelming amount of people that, you know, they're not being given proper informed consent by their doctors. While tardive dyskinesia is commonly reported with people on antipsychotics, several other classes of psychiatric drugs can also cause TD. In many patients, TD is irreversible and may continue long after the offending medication is discontinued. So for some people, it can actually be a permanent condition. The next serious issue of iatrogenic injury is post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. PSSD is reported to occur in as many as 80% of antidepressant users. The implications of PSSD are often debilitating, both physically and psychologically. Dr. David Healy published a report, and in his report, he found approximately 100% of those taking a serotonin reuptake inhibitor experience genital sensory change within half an hour of taking the drug. These effects primarily include reduced sensitivity, often defined as numbing. Despite solid evidence from both patient accounts and science, doctors frequently dismiss the very legitimate possibility of post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. Medical gaslighting. So I alluded to this earlier, and this is something that I experienced. I have the lived experience of being iatrogenically injured from multiple medications. Clients will frequently report paramount levels of distress when experiencing iatrogenic injury. You know, it's Dante's Inferno. It's the worst hell that you can ever imagine. And feeling disbelieved by, you know, pretty much all of my doctors and therapists, definitely precipitated an extreme state of hopelessness. And it can also even lead to suicidality in many clients. Once, you know, clients have been given a mental health diagnosis, unfortunately, I think that their experiences can be easily manipulated, so they will be considered subjective and biased. And, you know, I've seen this happen in mental health a lot, where, you know, if somebody is diagnosed with any type of mental health condition, when they come back to their therapist or psychiatrist and say, hey, you know, I'm having all these new symptoms from my medications, you know, their therapist may come back and say, well, you know, it's just part of your bipolar disorder, it's part of your depression, part of your anxiety. And you know, that's not to say that, you know, all of these symptoms are definitely always due to the medications, but I think it can be very isolating when, you know, deep down you've thought critically about the situation, you haven't had any of these symptoms before taking the drugs, and then you're coming to these, you know, people who are supposed to help you, and again, they may not be trained. You know, this is the whole point of the presentation. They may not have been trained to look out for these symptoms. You know, they may have been trained to only look for pathology. So it's not to put the fault on doctors or therapists, but it is to bring awareness to all of these issues. Harmed individuals are frequently unable to control the narrative of their own treatment and are subject to gaslighting, dangerous medical advice, and termination. This was actually from a blog that I wrote for the website Mad in America, when I, you know, went into detail about my own experience. And, as a closing point, an iatrogenically harmed client may present as defensive, but they have likely suffered years of suffering, chronic invalidation, and isolation. So I think the saving grace in all of this has been the online support groups. So the layperson support groups have filled a necessary gap in medical provider knowledge about psychiatric drug harm and withdrawal. There are currently hundreds of thousands of individuals that populate these support communities. This is in the absence of adequate medical support. These support groups emphasize the slow and exponential tapering of psychiatric drugs. Typically, tapering rates of 10% or less per month are encouraged. This is a huge contrast to the current guidelines endorsed by most physicians, which usually state that you can taper as high as 25% per month or higher. There are individuals who are able to do this, so that's not to say everybody needs to taper very slowly, but certainly it's safer the slower that you go, and especially if you're having a lot of symptoms or your intolerance with your current medication, it may be a better idea. The information and protocols proposed in these support groups are largely based on evidence-based research from renowned medical experts. These are some notable examples of online support groups and awareness organizations. Surviving Antidepressants, that's likely the biggest one. Benzo Buddies, Benzo Warrior Community, which is an online Facebook group that actually also has Zoom support meetings every week. The Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, the Alliance for Benzodiazepine Best Practices, the Akathisia Alliance for Education and Research, and a few others. And these are some resources that actually, I put up here because they can be shared with clients. And these are different guides. They're all evidence-based, just on ways to, promote harm reduction when stopping psychiatric drugs. I have found these really invaluable. I always share them, with anyone who may be having, trouble or, can't find the right support for discontinuing their psychiatric medication. So these are all really excellent. And then if I have time, these are my references. If I have time, I just want to play the video. See how to do that. I'm just gonna X out of here and see, here we go. So this is what akathisia looks like.
Does it have sound, Rose?
Can you guys hear that?
No.
When you share, when you share, if you want to stop the sharing and start sharing again. And
okay.
When you share, as soon as you hit the share screen, you will see a button that says share sound at the
Okay, thanks guys. Sorry for my
and optimize for video as well.
Okay, share, and where's optimized for video? I don't see
it's the same place on the left.
Oh, I see it. I see it.
Screen.
It won't let me. It won't let me click optimize for video for some reason.
Oh, me neither. So you just the sound thing.
Okay, so let me start that over. Okay.
Now, more than ever, people are being prescribed medications to treat anxiety and depression. Unfortunately,
are you guys able to hear that?
Yes, perfect.
Patients are rarely warned that taking these prescriptions, even for short periods of time, can cause long-term injury. Medication-induced akathisia is a dangerous side effect which produces a powerful inner restlessness, terror, and agitation that can drive anyone to self-harm, violence, and suicide. Akathisia is caused by damage to the central nervous system, commonly brought on by psychiatric medications. It can also be triggered by other pharmaceuticals like antibiotics and anti-nausea drugs. Akathisia can occur when starting, changing, or stopping these medications. For some, the torture can last years after taking the last dose.
Akathisia is the most horrific and violating thing I have ever endured.
You feel like your brain doesn't belong to you anymore. It feels like being continually doused in boiling oil.
You need to move, but it doesn't relieve the agony. It will bring you to your knees every day.
A chemical terror that never lets up.
No one would ever believe how bad this is without experiencing it for themselves. You would do anything to make it stop.
Pharmaceutical companies know how dangerous akathisia is, but due to it being underreported and underpublicized, many doctors do not. As a result, sufferers are left feeling desperate and unheard by medical professionals who often misdiagnose akathisia. This can lead to further harm through the prescribing of additional medications which can worsen the injury. You and your loved ones deserve to have full informed consent before starting any medication. For resources and information, visit us at akathisiaalliance.org.
Okay, and that concludes my presentation. I would love to hear any feedback. Sorry, I know I went a little bit fast in the interest of time.
That was amazing, Rose. Thank you so much, and so informative. I learned so many things.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I have a quick question. How would we incorporate this knowledge into the mental health profession?
So that's actually a really good question. So in my resources, and if anybody's interested, I can certainly email them my entire presentation. There is a guide. It's called, it's a guide for prescribed drug dependence. It's by a group of psychologists that are actually in the UK. And they have a manual about, how to have these, difficult discussions and, what counselors can expect in terms of presenting withdrawal symptoms.
Thank you.
No, go, Dr. Machuca.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that, thank you for this presentation. It supports the wellness perspective that we counselors have. A lot of us counselors are formed with the identity of, as much as possible, trying to get our clients to function without any type of medication, but actually being able to just develop their own capability to deal with the circumstances. So it's not that we are completely against it, because there might be some circumstances in which clients might need to use some medications, but that doesn't mean that they have to use it for their entire lives. And that is where sometimes the misconception occurs. So people who are very anxious, sometimes they need to have some medication in order for them to be able to learn skills, to start managing things on their own. And then they can, stop using the medication gradually under the guidance of their doctors. But again, this definitely supports our value in terms of facilitating for clients to be the ones who are the primary agents in their own well-being.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't include in my presentation, but this isn't pill shaming. This isn't discouraging people, to either start medication or telling them to stop their current medications, but it's really just to bring awareness when there really isn't any. I've been advocating for people harmed by medications for 2 years now, and I find a lot of pushback from psychologists, from psychiatrists who are, essentially saying that what I'm doing is, discouraging people, but that's not the issue at all. I totally recognize that and validate that medication can help, so many people, but, we need to be given informed consent. I was not given proper informed consent when I started medications, and I see, friends all the time, they'll be on a prescription. They're not told that, with benzodiazepines, for example, there was a black box warning label added in 2020. And we now know that you can become dependent on benzodiazepines within several days, even taking it as prescribed. So there has been a lot, because of the awareness efforts, there has been, a large push into these various agencies. So it looks like some people are interested. So I'll definitely email the prescribed drug dependence guide and all the resources that I have.
Any last questions out there? Well, Rose, thank you so much for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really great. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, I think, thank you for being here. I think it's very important to bring some, as Dr. Machuca was saying, grounding to this idea that, to the wellness model, that it's not about getting rid of something, it's about bringing some thinking to it. And how do we do that? How do we do that mindfully? So thank you, Rose. Thank you for presenting.
It was a privilege. Thank you.
All right. So our next presenter is Ashley Kurns. She's talking about married couples and their perspective toward family expansion. What an anxiety-producing topic. Ashley is currently a doctoral student at Barry University, studying counseling with a focus in marriage and couples counseling, as well as a registered mental health intern. During her master's program, she took a 3-course certification in marriage and family therapy that explored the key foundational principles of working with specific populations. It is a passion of hers to hone in on the skills and specialize in therapy with a marriage and family population. Well, Ashley, you're going to have a lot of work cut out for you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I will go ahead and share my screen now. Can everybody see? All right. All right, hello everyone. My name is Ashley Kurns. It is a pleasure of mine to be able to share my independent research on married couples expanding their family units with the addition of their first child. This is a phenomenological study, qualitative. So the purpose of my study was to explore the relationship between family development theory and the phenomena of married couples expanding their family unit with the addition of a child. So married couples, they often experience a shift in their expectations of expanding their family unit prior to having their first child in comparison to what their actual lived experience is when they actually expand their family unit. I want for all of you to be able to learn about the unique experiences and needs of couples in the process of introducing their first child and their experience of how the family unit has changed after their first child has been introduced. I also hope that this study may assist counselors who aspire to or who currently work with married couples discuss and explore recommendations for counseling practice, training, and future research in regards to serving and working with families introducing their first child. So I utilized Evelyn Duval's contribution to family development theory for my study. In her theory, she explored the ways in which couples deal with various roles and developmental tasks within the marriage as they move through each stage of the life cycle. My present study mainly focused on stage 1, which is the married couple, and stage 2, which is childbearing. So stage 1 of Duval's theory primarily focuses on establishing a mutually satisfying marriage and adjusting to pregnancy, while stage 2 focuses on having and adjusting to an infant and establishing a satisfying home for both the parents and the infants. A really major theme in this theory is critical role transitions. Those are the periods between getting married and first parenthood, and it is defined as the interaction of disarray and reorganization following the event that initiates a stage of change. Duval theorized that married couples face common satisfactions and challenges as they move through each stage. The transition to parenthood constitutes a period of stressful and sometimes maladaptive change for a significant portion of new parents. So for many of you who may be working with this population, you may see some of these recurring themes and patterns as they are in this critical role transition. These are some things that you can be aware of as you're working with this population. I did use the qualitative approach phenomenology, and I wanted to kind of go over some of the aspects of my study that aligned with phenomenology. I focused on the abiding concern of the comparison between married couples' expectations and their lived experiences of first-time parenthood. I also aimed to have to show a deeper understanding, which was gained from my study, as well as what it was like to experience the phenomenon from the participants' perspective. So to go over my methods, a recruitment flyer was posted in Facebook groups targeted toward married couples between the ages of 18 and 40 who had recently expanded their family unit with the introduction of their first child. I had a total of 6 participants, which were 3 sets of married couples who were properly screened and invited to partake in the study. Each set of married couples participated in a semi-structured video audio recorded interview via Cisco WebEx for up to 40 minutes. Recordings were transcribed by the platform and coded by the researcher, which was myself. The data was returned to the participants after the initial interview to check for accuracy and resonance with their experiences. So my overarching research question was, what are the perspectives of married couples in regard to expanding their family unit? But I definitely wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this, which would bring me to my research sub-questions, which were, what are the expected milestones that must be accomplished by married couples before family expansion is considered? Furthermore, I wanted to investigate, how did the family dynamic change after the family had expanded? And lastly, I wanted to also investigate, did the experience change within the family dynamic correlate with their prior expectations before the family expansion had taken place? So through my research, I was able to establish 6 different themes. So the questions that you guys all saw, they aim to examine the perspectives of participants prior to, as well as their lived experiences, and they further explored the milestones. So these are some of the themes that came from those research questions: timeline, career and finances, communication, balance, support, and unknown expectations. So in regard to timeline, all of the couples who I interviewed communicated about having a time frame of when to have their first child. All of the couples initially planned to have a baby before turning the age of 30. Some of the couples did achieve this. However, the last couple concluded that they are thankful for waiting longer to have a child, which was very interesting. All of the couples reported satisfaction with the freedom to travel and to have one-on-one time without limitations. And they all had different levels of pre-planning. One couple did not necessarily plan much at all, while the other 2 spent years preparing. So these are some personal observations that were made during the interview that aligned with their timeline that they had set prior to having their first child. In regard to career and finances, all of the couples, they strive to become established in their careers prior to having their baby and to be financially stable. It was really interesting because many of the husbands spoke about being the provider of the family, so the career was especially important to them. But this study also showed kind of the aspect of a modern day family because all of the wives also had a career of their own. In regard to communication, some of the couples did not communicate clearly about expectations of family roles prior to the baby. But one of the couples, they actually did. They spent years explaining how they wanted that to look, and they agreed to split the responsibility 50-50. However, all of the couples did express importance in communicating when they weren't on the same page. So what I did think was pretty fascinating was a lot of the husbands felt that they were doing the mommy roles. They felt that some of the obligations that they had fell into the mother's role of what they would expect the mother to do with the children. And so they also explained how this is more of a modern day family where both the husband and the wife are putting in equal effort, which is really interesting. In regard to balance, many of the couples reported struggling with balancing their careers, time with their family, and doing desired experiences with one another. But many of them did report striving to balance out their parenting styles and factors involved in what they taught their children. If you see here, a lot of them are putting, how do I go to work? How do I still provide a meal? How do I make sure the house is clean? How do I make sure the baby is okay? These are a lot of things that they were probably expecting prior to having a child, but it was pretty unforeseen as far as the magnitude of how it would affect them. So this was definitely a recurring theme throughout all of the interviews, how to make all of these things work and still have a mutually satisfying marriage. So one of the most profound themes that I found within this study was support. Many of the husbands expressed expecting to work and take care of the bills while receiving support from their wives by taking care of the household and being the primary caregiver. However, many of the wives, they reported expecting more of a 50-50 help from their husbands due to the fact that they also work themselves. So like we were saying earlier, this is more of a modern day family dynamic because prior to this, in the past, a lot of times women weren't working, so they had a lot more time to tend to the household, tend to the children, while the husbands were out working. But now that they're both doing that, it was difficult for them to kind of find that balance, as stated before. So one of the couples, they experienced growing up in a two-parent household where the 50-50 level of responsibility differed. So they based their expectations on what they had witnessed growing up, which happened to have different looks for each of them. The husbands did appear to be accepting of the shared responsibility despite their expectations not necessarily being met. And the wives also agreed that they were grateful about the extra support that they received from their husbands. One of the wives, however, did express that she wants more involvement from her husband than what he is currently giving. So that is possibly something that they might explore in a therapeutic setting. And there could be some interventions put into place as to how their expectations can be able to align better. And that also leads me to unknown expectations, which was also another major theme. Some of the couples reported not entirely knowing what to expect despite careful preparations, and that it is still a struggle figuring it out. Like I said, a lot of them spent years preparing, whether it was reading books, speaking with other married couples who already had their first child, babysitting, trying to get the feel of what it would be like to be a parent. But despite all of the preparation and all the expectations that they had set into place, it was still a lot of things about parenthood that they hadn't necessarily considered or experienced because it was their first time. So it was interesting to see how, despite all of the preparations, all the planning, how they're able to come together and make it work, and basically just be the best parent that they can possibly be. So I know I'm running through these pretty fast for the sake of time, but if you guys have any questions or comments, we can save those for the end. So in essence, this study did appear to align with family development's theory that married couples do face a series of common satisfactions and challenges as they transition through each stage of the life cycle. I found that married couples, they naturally desire to establish a mutually satisfying marriage and adjust to future pregnancy during stage 1, as well as adjusting to having an infant and establishing a satisfying home for both parents and infants during stage 2, as evidenced by the themes. The study further found that many of the expectations that were present prior to the family expansion were not necessarily congruent with their lived experiences that were present after the family expansion had taken place. This was primarily in regards to family roles and level of responsibility. However, the study also found that expectations of anticipated milestones had been satisfied prior to family expansion. That was one of the things that I found to be very interesting, that they were able to satisfy all of their milestones, or majority of them, prior to having their first child. I found that the fact that they were able to do that definitely influenced the level of satisfaction overall that they had when their child was introduced. So for future research, I would like to examine the family development theory from a non-traditional perspective, because as I found, there were a lot of modern day themes that I was observing that probably aren't as relevant nowadays from family development theory. So I would like to look at couples who had children prior to marriage, maybe divorced families and remarriage, These family dynamics are definitely more normalized in our current society, and traditional family dynamics are definitely harder to find. So I would like to explore it from that lens in future research. And also a comparative analysis of married couples' perspectives of stages 1 and 2 from their firstborn in comparison to their secondborn child, because that is definitely an area where there could be a lot of difference. So I would love to explore it from that lens as well. So these are my references, and I would now like to open the floor to any questions or comments that any of you may have.
My question was going to be, Ashley, great presentation, by the way, but I was going to ask about the non-traditional families, right? Those of us that had children before marriage, but you answered it, that's coming.
Yes, definitely an exploration on that for sure. Thank you.
You got a message in the chat about what were your demographics again? How do you think culture influences these perspectives?
Yes, so for my demographics, all of the couples that you saw, they were in their mid-30s. Two of them were African-American, one was Hispanic. And the cultural influence on these perspectives, I think they were more so about the household that they grew up in. All of them grew up in 2-parent households. And so a lot of their expectations were influenced by what they witnessed when they were growing up. I didn't necessarily see any cultural factors as far as their race, but I did notice that all of them did have 2-parent households. And so that they definitely spoke a lot about that when they were explaining what their expectations were and just what they thought things would be like in comparison to how they actually currently are. Thank you.
What got you into this, Ashley? How'd you get interested?
How did I get interested? Oh, it's a great question. So throughout my life, when I was doing psychology and just wondering exactly like what path I wanted to take, I always found myself gearing more toward the counseling profession because I really love people. I love the study of people. I love the interaction of people. And as I wanted to pick a focus, I found that it was the family dynamic and just the aspect of working with more than one person in a unit was always just like, it always drew me. And so I definitely wanted to expand more on married couples, and not only married couples, but just family in general, all the different levels, all the different aspects of working with a unit. It's something that I've always been pretty passionate about. So I'm learning a lot in this program, and it's definitely increasing my interest every day.
Did you have something, Dr. Machuca?
I wanted to comment on great presentation, actually. I wanted to comment on, the further implications, that this has. Definitely, looking at a couple from a life cycle perspective, there are multiple changes that are going to be affecting the couple, like one of them being the first child, and then a lot of other possibilities. So this is one of the many possibilities for research with couples. But so I like that you are addressing this in particular, and of course being an advocate for considering all types of families and couples. I immediately went into I wonder how this would be with non-heterosexual couples, and they're welcoming of their first child, and so maybe this seems like a great pilot study for them for a broader study, that could include a lot of the diversity that has been mentioned, including that aspect. But there's so much. So I think one of the things that I like the most about these presentations is the ideas that it prompts to for you. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Matrika. I completely agree with you. I think that it's very important, especially as we pull from the family development theory, to see how we could adjust it to different forms of what family looks like, not just the husband and the wife, but all different aspects of what a family unit could look like. So absolutely. Thank you.
Narissa, did you have a question? I saw your hand up for a second.
No, I put it back down because it was basically the same thing what Machuku was saying. How would it be if you have like non-heterosexual, like how would it look? What would it look like? And interracial couples. So it was basically the same thing. So that's why I put it back down.
Well, I hear no matter who you are, you come from a family and you bring it with you into your family.
Yeah, that is the idea of family schema. We all have a family schema, the family, our family of origin, and many couples, one common struggle that I see particularly in my practice is that, they come with a very, they come with this idea that their family schema is the family schema, right? Mm-hmm. And then is that maybe their partner doesn't have the same family schema. They might come from, with a different family schema. And then as a counselor, you help them to sort of like navigate coming with their own family schema to make it about them now together and that new family that they are starting. And it's quite interesting. This is just related, but recently I was doing that exercise with a couple and they don't have children yet, but they have dogs and cats. They have a dog and a cat. So I was like, okay, well, let's we were talking about the family schemas and, the process of, functioning according to a collaborative, family schema that they are putting together for themselves, and how even the cat and the dog needed to be incorporated into that dynamic. This is a way of making it light, but definitely with children it's a little bit more complex, but equally interesting.
Absolutely. I think family development theory is something that definitely needs to be updated. And I would like to contribute to that updating, especially with the further study, because the literature was actually very thin on non-traditional family units and just like on non-heterosexual family units. A lot of it is very, very outdated. And so I would love to see how we could apply this theory with these new traditions, these new roles, these new dynamics. It would be very fascinating. So you guys might be able to see that study sometime soon in the near future.
Ashley, what was it? What was your experience with the qualitative research? That's what I saw you were doing.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I could definitely see myself doing more qualitative studies, even mixed method studies, but qualitative for sure is something that I love the aspect of the human experience. That's a main aspect of qualitative studies, and just the very personal interviews and being able to see not just from a numerical lens, but just from like an actual personal narrative of these individuals and what their experience and these phenomena are like.
It looks like you got a question here from why a phenomenological research?
Oh, that's a good question. So married couples and expanding their family unit is a huge phenomenon. It's something that a lot of people, it's so intricate. There's many different experiences that come from that. And I definitely wanted to use the phenomenology lens because I wanted to be able to expand on that phenomenon and see exactly how those experiences could influence our work with these clients. Because a lot of these issues, a lot of these presented concerns we will see, especially during this critical transition period. So it's important for us to be able to gain some insight into what their experience is like. So as we're working with them, we have a lot more to pull from.
Why do you have to have good answers to everything, Ashley?
It's something I'm passionate about.
How do you, okay, so a follow-up question is, how do you treat your own research bias during the research?
Oh, yes, it's definitely something that you have to check at the door. You know, you absolutely, whether you're working with clients, whether you're conducting research, you have to always go into it knowing like this person is an expert on their own lives. Regardless of what we've read, what we've researched, what we've found in the past, we have to be able to trust that they're the experts. They're going to provide us with the narrative, with the story that will contribute to the data. It's not about what we expect, it's what we're learning from them.
Were there any narratives that people brought that you found in the research that you got reactive to?
I probably will say the aspects of the many of the husbands stating that they expect to be as involved with the nurturing and the caring of the children. I was that did give me a little bit of a reaction, but at the same time, it was a little expected because you do hear about it a lot throughout history. That's what the expectations were. But it was interesting to hear that even in 2021 that was the outlook.
I hear you. How many parents do we have? Do we have any parents in the crowd?
Oh, interesting. So that's a great question, Guillermo, because I am wondering, could any of you identify or resonate with what the participants what they reported?
You're on mute, Carolina.
Yeah, I think so, Ashley. I think at the beginning, maybe at the beginning, there's a lot of uncertainty and role dynamics. One of the things my husband would always say, especially my little one breastfed for 6 months. So whenever she would wake up in the middle of the night, he would be like, "I can't help you." And so that's understood, right? Certain roles, what is he gonna do? That was part of it. But I was lucky. He helps out a lot, tremendously. I think one of the things I resonated with as well in your presentation was the family dynamics, the family of origin. At the beginning, oh man, I think that was the tough part, especially my family. They had a lot of input. So at some point I had to be like, that's it, stop. No more input. And his family as well. We're both originally from Colombia, but from 2 different parts. So they both were driving me insane. I was like, no more. Your input will be solicited. I don't want it freely. Thank you. Because I was really like, you're trying to find your way as a new mom, and then you have from both sides. So I was like, no more. That's it. At some point I was overfeeding her because my mom and my grandma were like, oh, she needs more milk. Your breast milk is not enough. And so one of my cousins was like, are you feeding her after you're feeding her? I was like, yeah. He's like, stop. They did that to my kids too. So just stop. I was like, okay.
Carolina, that's such a great point that you bring up, because that could also be a point for further exploration, is not just the married couple and their influences, but the entire family structure influencing, the introduction of this first child. That is a very great point. Thank you.
Are there any firstborns out there or only children?
I'm an only child.
Tara too, Tara. That's interesting, actually. What pressure does the first child get as the focus of all that love?
It's so funny. I saw this commercial not too long ago where it was like the mother and the father, they were like super anxious about the first child and like running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And the second child, they were just like, whatever, like it was like a complete different outlook. And I was like, okay, that will actually be really interesting to assess how accurate that is. I know that the pressure definitely is on with your first child because it's a completely new experience. You just don't know what to expect, no matter how much you plan for it. But once you get that second child, it's like, okay, I've been through this before. I've been here.
Here's a last question for you. I got in the chat. How will your research project or your research findings contribute to family counselor education and knowledge?
Great question. Yeah, definitely just the aspects of how we can update, what we know about family dynamics and how we can further our perspectives and outlooks on what family looks like, what it represents, and how, as especially as counselor educators, how we can psychoeducate on the different aspects of family.
Ashley, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for this opportunity. You guys were all amazing. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so our next presentation is by Teri Caro Hernandez. She's been a part of the Baptist South Florida family for over 6 years. Currently, she's a trainer for the Patient Experience Department, the corporate division. Her background is in education, and she is a clinically certified child life specialist with over 5 years of experience working with hospitalized children. She enjoys working with clinical teams and helping them make a true connection with those that seek medical care at Baptist. She wants to help make sure that Baptist continues to be the provider of healthcare that cares. And her title today is Utilizing Employee Training to Enhance the Patient Experience. And she has been working with Jalane Maloun again, who, by the way, this year, Dr. Maloun was chosen for the Sister Jean O'Loughlin OP Scholars Award, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award and the highest award a Barry University faculty member can achieve. Congratulations, Dr. Maloun. And now I leave it up to you guys.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. Hi, everyone. We're almost done for today, so just bear with us for just a little longer. My name is Teri. I am, as Guillermo shared, I am currently a corporate trainer for Baptist Health South Florida. And I thoroughly enjoy my job. So a little background, I am a clinically certified child life specialist. Originally, I worked at what's now Nicholas Children's Hospital, but before it was Miami Children's, and they used to have a rather robust child life program that really focused on education, on advocacy, making sure that patients would comply with the plan of care, right? Because when you've got little ones that are sick or not feeling well or have a new diagnosis, let's say of diabetes, right? Parents are always very involved, but how do you get the child to be involved? And throughout my time there, I often realized how important that employee culture was to the successful implementation of everything down to a child taking their medication, right? And so I kind of grew fond of seeing how all those corporate visions and plans really kind of funneled themselves into each individual employee and how they carried out their job and how they were able to connect with the families that we served then, and make sure that we paved the way for there to be a compliance and help these families get on the road to wellness. And so that brings us to today, right, 6 years later. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about my journey now at Baptist Health and seeing how, as a corporate trainer, I can definitely say there is great value in using corporate training to enhance that consumer patient experience. So just to give you a little bit, and I know if you were on earlier, you saw one of my team members, Leo, and a coworker of mine, Millie, who also talked a little bit about Baptist Health. So it's kind of funny, it may sound like a Baptist Health plugin, but it totally isn't. But I wanted to share with you just to kind of give you a global perspective of why I'm talking about corporate training today. Let's paint this picture. So we talked earlier, and you might have heard 1.5 million is the number of patients that we see a year. But this map that's on the screen paints a very good picture. Can everyone see it?
Teri, we can't see we can't see what you're sharing yet.
Okay, let's see. Not sure why. Can you see it now?
No, let me make. You should have privileges.
So I don't see a little box around my presentation.
It should be at the top when you go to share it.
Yeah, for some reason it says share, but okay, let's try that again, okay?
Okay.
Terribly sorry.
No,
I do this for a living. I normally don't have these issues. All right, let's try this again.
There you go.
Can you see it now?
Lovely, perfect, thank you.
Perfect, great, okay. So this is a.
It went away, Teri.
It says stopped.
It went away. I didn't stop it.
Maybe you double clicked on it and it started and then the second click stopped it.
So weird. All right, let's do this again.
Okay, it says it started.
I see
Okay,
it.
good.
Awesome.
All right, so I usually work with 3 screens, so we're just gonna move you over. Okay. Can you see my full map now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is that imprint that we were talking about earlier. So when we were talking about 1.5 million patients and consumers a year, now you can kind of see why it is so important to have a very thorough employee training program. Why? Because you can see in the Tri-County area how many touch points Baptist House as an organization has. So all these little different colors all represent a different type of service, right? So the most common is a hospital, but our hospital ones, although they're the largest touch points, they aren't necessarily the ones that we've got frequently throughout the Tri-County area, right? So those little yellow ones are just those urgent cares, right? So people come in and they have a cold, or during COVID, right? They wanted to get tested or they needed an x-ray. So the reason I share this with you is because you can imagine that the demographic population that we serve is very different in Coral Springs than it is going to be in South Miami or in Country Walk or even in Marathon, right, in the Keys. And the lifestyle is completely different and much more laid back in the Florida Keys, right? So corporate training for employees serves multiple purposes. So essentially, you want to make sure that you're driving the consumer and patient satisfaction, because that is very much a loyalty driver, right? It makes people want to come back to your organization because they felt like they were satisfied or connected with the employee. But the second component, and we'll talk about it later in more detail, is the fact that employee engagement is also driven by corporate training. And so as a summary for that slide, with such a diverse community in South Florida, it's really important for the healthcare staff to understand how each cultural group sees healthcare. How do they prefer communication, and what expectations do they have of their healthcare provider? So it's interestingly enough, you know, this entire forum has been about those contributions, those values that we hold, you know, your wellness, your emotional wellness, you know, as an individual. What are those values that you bring into your relationships, into your marriage, into how you raise children? But what about you as a person do you bring into the organization that you work for, right? Especially when it comes to healthcare, right? We're not talking about simply packaging a box, wrapping it together, shipping it out. We're talking about the way that we can help shape employees is kind of ingrained in who they are as people and how they value their own healthcare experiences. And so I wanted to share something by way of background. As a system, Baptist Health South Florida really works to educate and advocate. Okay, and these are some background supporting options that we're doing right now that also drive the patient experience. What are they? We just recently, within the last year and a half, hired a chief wellness officer. And the focus of this chief wellness officer, you might say wellness officer in a healthcare system, that sounds redundant. Well, yeah, it's really important. Why? Because we want to be the kind of organization that everyone plays a role in taking care of people that take care of people. I'm going to say that again, right? Whether you are a director, a manager that is not a clinician, not a nurse, not a doctor, not a tech,
we want to make sure that the entire system is founded on the belief that whether you are frontline taking care of patients and consumers, you help to take care of people that take care of those people, right? And so another element that we've got is that we just integrated psychotherapists and psychiatric services under the umbrella of primary care, which is something new to us, right? Because you typically had a separate branch for mental and emotional care, separate from the physiological wellness route. Most recently, and one of the things that my peers talked about earlier today was technology, right? We've just purchased a system, and it's almost kind of like a rounding system where you go by the hospital and you use this tablet. And the purpose of this tablet is twofold. It's not just immediate patient and consumer satisfaction. It's actually teaching your staff the importance of advocating for the family that they have in front of them. Why is that? They'll come in and they check on that patient or that consumer, and they say, you know, how was your sleep last night? How was your food this morning? Did you get your test results? Do you understand your test results? Do you need someone to come and explain them to you? And by bringing those types of things to the forefront, we are inadvertently, by the secondary effect, training our staff to think that way, to realize that healthcare is not just a checklist kind of thing, right? I checked the bed, I did the lab work, all is normal, they got their food, the safety bed chairs the bed rails are up. No, there's more, there's a bigger picture to it. And so our first goal for today is just to quickly review that organizational training enhances corporate culture. It helps with the patient experience. It establishes global service goals. Now, how many of you currently work for an organization that has a corporate mission? Do you know what your organization's corporate mission is?
And you could go ahead and click that raise hand at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, Raul.
Dr.
Machuca, I'm so sorry. I had my cursor over it and I didn't realize it was you.
Oh, no worries. I work for Teri, so we have, we're corporate mission. We have core commitments that we use on every single document that we produce. So we have it really clear.
Yeah, and you can see it, I'm sure, also as a continuous reminder, right? Of it's almost kind of like, I'm going to tell you in a nice way, and sometimes I'm going to remind you in a not so nice way. So there's this image, and I tried very hard to find it for the presentation, but I wasn't able to. But there's one of the leaders that I support. She absolutely is like girl crushing on Cleveland Clinic. Okay, and with good reason, right? Cleveland Clinic has an excellent reputation. And there is a location in Cleveland Clinic that actually has their vision and mission in the walls, written on the walls of their lobby. When you walk in as a patient or as a family member looking for medical care, you're going to see that front and center. And I imagine that as a patient or as a consumer of their services, that would bring a certain level of peace for me, because it helps me to see that employees are expected to have a certain standard. And the reason I asked if anyone else worked for an organization that had that is because oftentimes we forget that we bring to the table all of our own past experiences with past performers, with past employers, or maybe in healthcare, right? What was your last experience at the doctor's office or in a prior hospitalization? You carry that with you if you are one of these 25,000 people that works for Baptist South Florida. And so organizational training helps us to say, let's align who you are as a person, the values that you have, and let us show you where we're going. Let us connect you to a greater purpose. And so that's really at the core of the value of corporate training, right? And with corporate training, you hear a lot of different things, whether you are Amazon or you're Apple, every single company has a vision and a mission statement. When it comes to healthcare, it's almost kind of like there's an added pressure, because now you are caring for people in their most vulnerable state. And that is when you really have to bring your A game on. You know, yesterday I was working with a physician at a local urgent care, and, you know, in reviewing some patient comments with her, she said, you know, patients sometimes forget that we're people too. And I said to her, you're right. And that's simply a luxury that we can't afford when we are caring for others. It's almost like you have to have a superpower of some sort, that when your badge, your hospital badge comes on, you're able to disconnect for just a little bit so that you can prioritize the needs of the person that's in front of you, because they come to you as their resource, as their help, right? So it's a very fine line, but there's so much value and it's so critical, right? It is a public service field, and the public always comes first. And that's why it's so important for us, as you saw in that other screen, you know, the burnout, the wellness, all those other things are so important to balance that out. You know, when you take that badge off as a physician, as a nurse, as a tech, how do you take care of yourself, your emotional and your mental well-being, so that tomorrow you can do that all over again? And so our corporate training kind of reinforces that type of belief.
And Teri, one other thing, just when people come to, let's say, a hospital environment, it may be that they're presenting problems are physical, and that's why they're there for. But I think it's an extra level that makes it more difficult when people have some emotional or mental wellness concerns, and that's also a burden on those serving those who come to the hospital to ensure all of their needs are met, even those needs that are less visible.
Correct. And you know, one of the biggest entry points into the healthcare system is in one of those urgent cares, right? And oftentimes you'll have patients that are presenting symptoms of something that's much more minor and not so acute, but there's so many underlying issues that we're not able to diagnose in an urgent care setting in an hour. And so making that handoff or that referral for that patient to see someone else is so important to our doctors and our medical staff, but it's oftentimes so difficult to gauge in such a short amount of time. So a lot of our corporate trainings talk about those values, the welcoming, the inclusivity, the need for psychosocial support. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the presentation. You know, one of the second objectives of today is just to talk about the importance of using corporate training in collaboration with patient satisfaction data. So if anyone on this call this morning has ever been to any five-star hotel, or you've ever been shopping even for Zappos, they are all very focused on patient satisfaction. And people often say, well, how does healthcare align itself with patient satisfaction? Well, number one, it's still a business that wants to continue to grow and expand so that they can continue to take care of the community that they're in. But secondly, those things are ways for us to know, are we doing a good job? Are the families and the people that we care for feeling like we see you, we hear you, we know what you're saying? And so we use multiple different touch points to bring the consumer's voice to life. One of them is Press Ganey. Press Ganey is a survey company that's used actually by 75% of the nation's top healthcare systems, right? So you're in a really good pool of information with national norms and trends. But we also use a lot of local things like the Yelp and the Google reviews. HCAHPS is another one that is tied back to reimbursement, right? And all of these things measure what is the consumer saying about their time with your employees, with your medical facility. It's not just, did I get better? Did you make me feel better in a reasonable amount of time? A lot of it has to do with, did you advocate for me? Did you realize that I was different than the patient in the room next door? So as we talked about earlier with the demographic map that we showed about with Baptist Health, every patient population needs to be spoken to in a different way. And even within those populations and those demographics, everyone still varies, right? There's a sense of what is too much touch? Do you like it when your physician puts their hand on their shoulder? Or post-COVID, do you want them not to even touch you, right? Do you want us to speak to your spouse? Guillermo, if you go to the urgent care and you bring a relative with you, right? Do you want them to look at them and say, do you have any questions? Because you're going to be taking care of Guillermo. We know you're going to remind him of his medication, right? Everyone has a different preference. So corporate training helps us to get that feedback that we get from those surveys and say, okay, for generalization purposes, you always have to be kind of, careful that you don't misread a room. But for the most part, it is safe to say that if you live in Westchester, in Miami, which is predominantly a Hispanic community, right? The majority of the times you're not going to come in by yourself. You're going to come in with a family member. And your family member is going to ask the doctor a question and say, should she be walking around outside barefoot when she's got a cold or a congestion, right? Like you're going to get that grandma that asks or that mom that asks. And so the goal of using all this feedback is to say, yes, our patients are scoring us the right way. They're saying this is important to them. They're saying they want to see more personalized attention. In another area of the city, we might see a younger generation, early 20s that are just now starting to take care of themselves, right? Without any type of partner or parent involvement. And with that community, we want to increase self-advocacy, right? We want to increase their healthcare literacy. We want to kind of give them the ropes, healthcare 101. Right? As employees that see patients like that, you need to be prepared to not just give them the Tylenol, take their temperature, or give them test results. Part of what you do now becomes part of the expectation they have of healthcare. And so by using all of the feedback that we get from these types of sources, we're able to come back to our employee base and say, great. You're succeeding really well in this area. Now let us help you translate that in a way that your patient can receive it. Because if you've got great information to give, but the people you're trying to give it to and you are not connecting, it's like, it's not even there. So what does that patient satisfaction information look like? Okay, the goal is to increase communication between that nurse, that tech, that physician, and yourself as a consumer, right? Often, how many times hasn't any one of you been to an urgent care where the nurse may have taken your vitals and your blood pressure and they just walk right out of the room, right? I mean, I want to know, right? Just tell me the number. You're reading it. You're probably going to go chart it somewhere. Just tell me out loud.
Am I dying? That's what
yeah.
I want to know.
Exactly. So, a lot of times we come back to staff and say, rather than just keeping that information to yourself, say it out loud. Tell the person, okay, your blood pressure is perfect. This is exactly the range you should be in. And then tell them the range. Not only did you make them feel better, but ta-da, you provided education. So now your people that are coming to you are feeling like you're really competent and you're a human being. You're educating others, right? That's great. It's a public service what you're doing.
You're really also showing them respect, and that you think that they can understand the number and explaining, as she's saying, it's really making that client feel very special and truly cared for. And it doesn't take all that long either.
No, it doesn't. It takes seconds. You're already in the room. Might as well just say it on your way out. One of the other things that we hope to always do is to provide validation. We noticed, and COVID comes up a lot, but COVID was kind of like a crash course in many ways, right? We live in a very interesting time period where most of the people that signed up to work in healthcare have never dealt with a pandemic. Right? Ebola a number of years ago, it was on such a small scale that you never really realized the impact that it had in the States. But when it came to COVID, you realize just how frail we are as a society. How do you care for people when you don't know what is happening? Do you want the doctor in the room? Do you not want the doctor in the room? What happens if all the doctors got sick? right? So we used a lot of patient feedback to be able to say, okay, there's common sense, and then we marry common sense with practicality, and then we marry that with what are your people saying, right? What are their needs being met? So validation is really important. Encouraging people to participate in their own healthcare is really important. Educating staff on varying needs by demographic, as we mentioned earlier, is key. Why is that? We've got over 225 different urgent care providers and medical staff, and they come from all different parts of the world. But if you have a physician that is, for example, from Lebanon, and she is brilliant, but her affect is very, very flat, when you place her in an urgent care setting with a demographic, the families that live there, the people that come to get medical care there are very emotionally driven. They're very warm and they're very endearing. They may have such a difficult time in receiving their medical information from this doctor that it almost becomes like a wall, and they leave without really feeling any better or knowing what was wrong with them because they just weren't able to process that information. And so sharing with each group, this is the demographic that lives around here. Have you taken a chance to walk outside in the parking lot? What do you see? What kind of families are there? What do the people look like? Have you gone down to the Starbucks down the street? What does that population look like? Are people talking? Are they quiet? Is everyone on their phone? You know, use your senses to kind of pick up and make an assessment on, okay, this is the kind of community, and bring that into the room so that you're able to really connect with that patient and consumer. Now, why do we use the word consumer with this type of healthcare field? And it's really important. And we use consumer because although it is understood that an individual coming to a healthcare facility is a patient because they are lacking in some sort of way, right? Whether you have an ingrown toenail or you have a cough or your eyes bothering you, right? There's different layers, but you are considered a patient. However, you're also considered a consumer because competition is fierce. Have you seen down at South Dixie Highway, you've got at least 3 different brands of urgent cares. You've got MD Now, you've got Sanitas, you've got Leon Medical Centers, you've got Baptist. And so consumerism is a really big thing, and healthcare is no exception. And so the next point is increasing patient satisfaction is a means of driving improved health outcomes. So an engaged patient and consumer is more likely going to take the medication that that doctor is telling them they need to take. If you felt that your doctor or your nurse didn't see you as a person, didn't listen when you said that antibiotics just give you an upset stomach, you're going to leave there and you will not take that antibiotic. And a week later, you're still going to be sick. And so increasing that communication skill to hopefully make a really strong connection between point A and point B is going to increase patient satisfaction, but more than anything, it is going to improve health outcomes, and people are going to feel better faster. And because they felt seen, they will likely come back to you when they have another need that perhaps isn't that easy to target, like mental health, like emotional well-being, like dietary issues, right? Things like that. And so finally, corporate training helps to build an engaged workforce. Why? Because healthcare is draining and it takes a lot of you mentally and emotionally as an employee. But when you can align yourself with the value of your organization and what their mission is, you can kind of tie yourself back to a greater purpose, right? It is easier to do something you don't like when it assigns itself to one of your own personal values, right? It now becomes a very personalized thing. And that's what we hope to look for. So I've heard a lot of people throughout my time at Baptist say, do you have any idea how many times I applied? Do you have any idea how many emails I got that said someone else was a better match? And, you know, sometimes we get it right. sometimes we don't get it right. You know, keep in mind an application process at every major system is computer driven, right? So it picks up on those words and then it says, okay, possible match, right? It's almost kind of like dating, swipe, same thing, right? It picks up on those words and it kind of lets you know, okay, this person might be a match. Then that person comes in for an interview, and sometimes you're talking about people and you're talking about empathy and they have a flat affect. They've got nothing there. And other times someone comes in and says, let me tell you why I became a nurse. I became a nurse because of my grandmother, or I became a nurse because my family was always unable to get good health care. And I want to make sure that I make a difference now in my family and encourage those around me to get good health care. And so everyone has a story that they bring. And if we are able to connect with them, then we're able to use corporate training to enhance our workforce engagement. And so what are some of those bonus points? Well, the patient feels better, right? Someone that likes what they do and sees value in it is now looking at the human to human quality. And that's what we want. It's about the human experience, right? We heard that term earlier today and I was like, oh, that's one of our words, right? It's a human experience, right? Wellness is a journey, but it's built on those human to human experiences, right? Sometimes as employees, we've got, like that doctor I spoke to yesterday, we've got a lot of times when everything else at home is broken. It's not going well, right? It's either a problem with a spouse or a difficulty with a child. But when you work in the healthcare industry, if you really do find value between you and the organization that you work for, it's a bucket filler. It's an opportunity to disconnect with things that may not be going so well and say, I'm making a difference in someone's life. And all of a sudden you've got a little glimmer of hope that your day is going to turn out to be a little bit better. And lastly, it reduces employee turnover. So you can see how corporate training really does help so many different ways. And it helps, if anything, for this. Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And perhaps in no other field, such as healthcare and education, are these two things more relevant. And so corporate training kind of helps.
And counseling.
Oh, absolutely. By its very nature. Hello. It's, you know, when it comes to the art of working with humans and with people, doesn't matter how much you know. Show me how much you care about me as a person. And then I'll pay attention to how much you know. So your thoughts and input are welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Teri. Any thoughts out there? Any thoughts or questions?
Yes, I always have to say something because it always inspires me when I hear, this presentation. So thank you for that. And it's, in the counseling setting, a lot of counselors work in private practices, group practices, and sometimes because we base our whole, I guess, work on the idea of having a relationship, a counseling relationship with the client, sometimes we overlook those things about, hey, let's have a mission, let's have, a clear corporate, identity. Let's check for client satisfaction. Like we just assume many times, and we don't realize that maybe we're losing clients who maybe are dropping from services because we were too confident on the fact that, oh, we it's our work is all about the relationship, but it always needs to make sure that it is actually translated. Also because, at least in my case, in my private practice, the best word or the best marketing is done by my own clients. They are the ones who bring the next client. So here, I check with them and I actually truly say, okay, so how is this going for you? How is this working for you? And just don't assume that it's just happening. Then it has, that additional impact on my practice.
Yeah, self-assessment is always a good point to start because every day is a new beginning. So to your point, you can be doing a great job, but
that introspection is important, that checking is not a sign of weakness, which oftentimes society sees that as a sign of weakness. It's kind of like, oh, tell me how I'm doing. Does that make you needy? No, it doesn't make you needy. It just wants to make sure that you're connecting with people the way that you intended to. And that's really important because we're all so different. Thank you, Dr. Machuca, for your insight.
I got a private message over here about how a counselor might be hired by your organization.
So you can go to our website. Our website actually does show all of the open positions. I do know that we also have our care on demand feature. Actually, just Dr. Rohaidi is one of our mental health providers, and she also sees patients through care on demand. So you have different opportunities, but on the website you should be able to see. Just type in that common field that you're looking for, right? Whether it's mental health, whether it's nursing, whatever skill set you're looking for, and it should match you with whatever open opportunities there are.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Teri. Much appreciated. And I love this topic. I think I'm very interested. So I'm presenting next, but it'll be brief, I promise. My name is Guillermo, and I just want to thank you all for coming out, first of all, and for all the presenters for being here, bringing your passion and your knowledge. So a little bit about me. I'm in the PhD program at Barry in the counseling PhD. My focus has always been marriage and family therapy. And I have a business called the November Institute where I coach individual clients, but also business leaders. And I work with companies to do training, more focused on the relationship aspect. You know, the idea that how are you managing yourself in the relationships, and how does that affect, how could that affect the company a little differently if you can manage yourself and you're functioning a little better. So today I'm going to be presenting on a topic that is ever of interest to me, which is this idea that human beings are both separate and connected. And I was thinking about this as everybody was presenting today. I think this underlies a lot of what everybody was talking about, and I would love to hear your thoughts after. So I'm going to just present the idea, and I'd love to hear from you guys. So I think human beings are inevitably and simultaneously separate and connected from one another. I think it's part of life. I think there's biological and evolutionary roots to that. This idea of interdependency, that we kind of rely on one another, that what I do affects what you do. Symbiosis, that we care for one another, that it's a symbiotic relationship. And that this togetherness, that there's something about living creatures, that they form groups for survival. Hold on, I'm making sure I pull the chat up because I see people coming in. Oh, thank you, Jalane. She put a website in the chat. Togetherness is this idea that groups get together for survival. And I think all of that plays out in reciprocity, where each person in a relationship kind of contributes to what goes on between them. And then the other part of reciprocity is, as you interact with other people, you create an environment, and then everybody's reacting to the environment that everybody helped create. It's fascinating. So I think there seems to be this quality to life itself that promotes mechanisms that both connect us and push us toward our own separateness, to be individual and to be connected. And I think we're always trying to find a balance in those two aspects. So I would think the ability to hold and appreciate both of these concepts at once is essential to all relationships, and in figuring out what it means to help someone else, which is my other fascination as being in this counseling field. What does it really mean to help somebody? What is being helpful? So this idea of holding two things in your head at once. Has anybody ever heard of John Keats, a poet from the Romantic era? Wrote died when he was 25 from a disease that you could probably get antibiotic for today. Speaking of good medication. But he came up with this idea of negative capability, which is the capability of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. Not that fact and reason aren't important, but that irritable reaching after, when we reach for conclusions sooner than we should, right? When we get stressed or anxious by the uncertainty and we try to fix it too quickly. And that could, as counselors, it could be trying to tell somebody what to do, prescribing the wrong medication as a doctor, something like that. Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby, said the test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. I love that. This idea that it's not about one idea over another. It's not about right or wrong. It's about the ability to hold them all at once. To say we're both separate and connected. And Niels Bohr is a physicist, and he wrote about two kinds of truth: ordinary truth and profound truth. An ordinary truth he saw as a statement whose opposite is a falsehood. And a profound truth is a statement whose opposite is also a profound truth. And as a physicist, he's the one that came up with this idea of complementarity, which is that you can't measure a wave and a particle at the same time. But what he took from that also is this practice he made for himself of trying to hold these opposing ideas in his head at the same time and see what he could come up with without falling into one side or the other. And this is a guy who I read all the time. He's a physicist, but he's also a wonderful poetic writer. And he writes about quantum physics and reality, and he's got a book called Reality Is Not What It Seems. That's the one I'm thinking of. But he talks about reality being a dense web of interactions. And I love this second one. Individual objects are the way in which they interact, right? We're not separate from our interactions. We can't define ourselves separate from the way we interact with others. And everything exists solely of the way in which it affects something else. What's that old saying? No man is an island. No person is an island, right? Everything exists solely of the way in which it affects something else. How much of our interactions are we unaware of, right? Not that you need to be watching yourself every second, but it's nice to know that whatever you're doing is affecting, you're sending out energy that's affecting the thing next to you or around you. And you're contributing to creating some kind of environment because you're both separate from it and connected to it at the same time.
Guillermo.
Yes.
You're getting some real love in the comments here. And I love these pictures, and these are just really profound quotes. I'm wondering if everyone wouldn't love to have a copy of your slideshow, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us afterwards.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd be
it's
happy
really
to.
beautiful and profound.
Thank you. I'd be happy to share it.
Oh yeah, they're saying yes, please. Okay.
Okay,
good.
okay. I'll send it out.
Thank you so much. Okay,
yeah.
They're loving it.
And so this is one of my favorite writers, probably a favorite poet, definitely of all time, is Rainer Maria Rilke. He's an interesting character. He was actually, his sister died when she was really young. And so his mother dressed him up as his sister for like years. And then when he was older, anybody know Rodin, the sculptor that did The Thinker, the one like that? Yes. He was an assistant for Rodin for a long time. Machuca, you raising your hand for something?
He probably knows Rodin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rodin. So he studied with Rodin, and Rodin taught him this idea of seeing, this concept of seeing into things, right? seeing something completely. And so Rilke has this quote. He's got many famous poems. The Duino elegies are probably my favorite. But I really love this quote. Once the realization is accepted that even between the closest human beings, infinite distances continue, a wonderful living side by side can grow, if they succeed in loving the distance between them, which makes it possible for each to see the other whole against the sky. If they succeed in loving the distance between them, which makes it possible for each to see the other whole against the sky. So there's something about this idea that our ability to appreciate and accept our separateness from other things allows us to connect more deeply to it, because we can appreciate its separateness and its connectedness to us at the same time. And that those two things aren't distinct from one another, that they're together, even though it seems paradoxical, that they exist simultaneously. And so Bowen theory has this idea of differentiation, this ability to distinguish between your thoughts and emotions, not that one is better than the other, but the ability to discern. And then the ability to distinguish your thoughts and emotions from the thoughts and emotions of others. If you figure out how to do this, guys, let me know, because this is not easy. And I think it's because we're both connected deeply, biologically, historically, spiritually, emotionally to each other, and yet we're also separate. And so figuring out how to be a self and be connected to other people is a lifelong task. So it's only in our separateness that we can truly and deeply connect with the greater sum of another. I like that quote by Audre Lorde too, McClure. Khadijah. It's a good quote. She said, Khadijah wrote, Audre Lorde also said that it's not our differences that divide us, but it's our inability to recognize and celebrate those differences. I think that's what we're talking about. And so in all human relationships, including counseling, one's ability to maintain separateness from the other while appreciating the inevitable depth of human connection is itself useful to somebody else. I think it generates authenticity, authentic curiosity about another. It gives another space to think for themselves. It allows each to hear the thinking of the other without taking the ideas of someone else personally. It promotes an enlarged perspective because the other is seen as a whole against the sky. And I think it allows for tenderness, compassion, as well as challenge. And it's constructive and healing. So enjoy the adventure. And I would just love to talk with you guys and hear your thoughts, ideas about today, about what I presented, anything.
Yeah, Guillermo, I actually learned a new term from you about the negative capability. And I think that actually ties into one of the competencies I was talking about earlier when working with certain clients, is that sometimes we're so quick to just solve a problem that we don't necessarily listen to what that person is trying to tell us. And I think that requires us to really listen with not a problem-solving mindset, but just a curious mindset. And I think Dr. Rudis was also talking about this a couple days ago, where in order for us to, explore this curiosity, we just have to be in a constant state of not knowing and just really take in what that client is saying without rushing to solve their problems, because sometimes they don't want that from you.
I hear that, Kadija.
Guillermo, I think it's great how you incorporate art and poetry into counseling and Bowen theory, and just kind of merging all that together. It's just beautiful. I always enjoy hearing you speak. And I think a lot of things you spoke about also can be translated and incorporated into couples and parenting, right?
I think so. I think so too. How do you appreciate the separateness of your kids?
Also, I think your presentation highlighted that some of these ideas that originated decades and so long ago are still just as relevant today as when the original thought came about. And philosophies can be applied and need to not be lost, although the years are passing.
Thanks, Dr. Maloun.
And Dr. Vera wrote in the chat, wow, art and counseling, what great combinations of possibilities and deep shared reflections.
Well, thank you guys. How was today for you guys? Did you guys have fun?
It definitely was. I loved it. I love hearing our peers. I love hearing even some of the I'm guessing they're peers as well, but I'm not familiar with some of them. All of the Baptist talk was really neat. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Guillermo, great presentation. You always bring that philosophical and just human perspective into what we do. So thank you for that. That was great. And thank you, Dr. Maloun, for joining us in this for the first time in our graduate student conference. And I hope this is not the last day that we have together. So we are definitely looking forward to expanding the participation of our programs in this conference. We do it every year, and typically we do it in the fall. We're happy to have you.
Well, and I just want to say thank you so much, because this is the first time I've heard about this since I joined ADSO from a different department, and I was really excited. I said, oh my gosh, I love things that are interdisciplinary, because it's when we share from different perspectives that we can really grow, because that pushes us in different directions that we didn't know we had that capacity to expand in that direction. And so I said, let me run this by my students, because my Baptist students are taking a master's degree in administration, a business administration course. But you know what? There's a lot of overlap. And clearly, if you're in counseling, if you're in healthcare more directly, it's all focused on the client. And whether you call that person the client or the patient or the consumer, it's a clear caring about taking care of that person to the best of your ability. It's very much heart work, and it's very much head work, and meeting clients, customers, consumers, patients where they are, and doing the best that you can by them. So I see a lot of integration. I was really thrilled to hear all of the different presentations. And this is the first time that we've presented here from my department, but it won't be the last. So thank you all for opening that opportunity for us, opening us with welcome arms, because we feel welcomed, and it was a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, Dr.
We had participation from the Bahamas students. And participation from our students in the Bahamas cohort. So thank you for being here. We noticed you. I have tons of screenshots throughout the day. So I think I just named myself the photographer. So I just took a lot of screenshots. So you would see them in our publication, and our newsletter is definitely going to be there when we write about the event. And I want to particularly thank Guillermo, because this is all he's doing. He has pretty much, handling this as our leader in the Beta Epsilon chapter of Chi Sigma Iota, our president. So he has done a lot of work behind the scenes. He has pretty much, handled this, on his own. So with the help of course, the board, but he is, the maker. He's the one who makes it happen. All of this, and a lot of other events that we have had this semester. So we only will have one more event, which is our initiation and graduation ceremony on December 4th. But Guillermo, thank you very much for putting this together.
Oh, thank you for your help, and thank you everybody for being here. And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime. Hopefully soon. Guys, absolutely have a wonderful day. Go enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye, everyone.